Chapter 101, Protective Claims. The sunlight filtered through the grand windows of the seaside mansion, casting a golden hue over the breakfast table. But my attention wasn't on the view, nor the morning light. It was on Scarlett. She sat by the table with her untouched plate of food, her fork stabbing at it half-heartedly. Her emerald eyes were narrowed in frustration, as if the contents of the plate had personally offended her. I tilted my head slightly, my icy blue gaze narrowing. Her shoulders seemed tense, and I could sense her irritation. My chest tightened. Any discomfort she felt was unacceptable. "Scarlett," I said, my voice low but firm. "What's wrong?" She glanced up briefly, her auburn curls brushing her cheek, but she quickly dropped her gaze back to the plate. "Nothing," she muttered, her tone curt. I wasn't convinced. "That doesn't look like nothing," I pressed, crossing my arms as I leaned slightly closer. She sighed heavily and set her fork down with a sharp clink against the plate. "It's just the food, Roman. It tastes off. Something about the seasoning, maybe, but it's nothing worth talking about." "Off? The food?" My eyes flicked to the plate, then back to Scarlett. A simple issue, maybe, but it was enough to ruin her mood at the very start of her day. That thought alone sent a wave of simmering anger into my chest. The kitchen staff had one job: to ensure every detail in this household was flawless, especially for her. I pulled out my phone, my fingers already dialing before another word passed between us. "Roman," she began, her tone wary. "What are you doing? Don't." Hunter's voice answered on the other end. "Alpha?" "The kitchen staff," I said sharply. "Fire them. All of them." There was a pause, brief but noticeable. "Alpha, no explanations needed, Hunter. Just handle it. Before Scarlett's next meal, I want new staff in place." My voice was ice, as resolute as steel. "Understood," Hunter said quickly, his professionalism kicking in, though I caught the faint edge of hesitation before the line went dead. I turned back to Scarlett, satisfied. But instead of the relief I expected, her emerald eyes were wide with disbelief. "Did you just fire the entire kitchen staff?" she asked, her tone incredulous. "They failed to do their job," I replied matter-of-factly. "Your breakfast was subpar. That is unacceptable." "Roman, that's insane," she exclaimed, throwing up her hands. "It's just breakfast. Firing an entire team over slightly off seasoning is completely over the top." I stepped closer, my icy gaze locking onto hers. "Nothing in this house should cause you discomfort, Scarlett. Not the food, not the staff, and certainly not something as simple as seasoning. Do you disagree?" Her lips pressed into a tight line, her frustration evident. But she didn't argue further. Instead, she shook her head and muttered, "Ridiculous," under her breath. My gaze softened slightly, but the next buzz of my phone diverted my attention. Hunter again. "Alpha," he began. "One more matter. James Amber's inquiries about his son Alexander are becoming persistent. He's pushing for clarity on Alexander's recent actions, particularly the property purchases near your territory." I frowned. Alexander had already irritated me enough by trying to secure that seaside mansion for Grace. But if James wanted answers, I would gladly provide them with a sharp edge. "Send James a message," I instructed Hunter. "Tell him this: the focus of his son's efforts needs adjustment. He should reflect on how poorly he treated Scarlett instead of wasting resources on irrelevant pursuits. Make sure he understands every word." "Clear message, Alpha." Hunter's tone carried mild approval. "Consider it done." I ended the call and turned back to Scarlett, who was now idly poking at her food again. Concern flashed through me as I realized she still hadn't eaten properly. "What now?" I said softly, my voice laced with both irritation and worry. She glanced up at me, her frustration flickering in her expression before she sighed. "I just wanted one normal breakfast, Roman. Is that really so much to ask?" I reached out and brushed a loose curl from her face, my touch lingering. "Next time it will be perfect." Roman's parting words echoed in my mind as I sat on the couch, staring at the sunlight streaming through the window. "Putting the Winterpack's resources to better use," he had said before leaving the mansion. I didn't need to ask what he was doing. He was breaking them down, piece by piece. And as much as I appreciated his unwavering protection, it sat uneasily in my chest. The lengths he was willing to go for me sometimes crossed lines I wasn't sure should be crossed. A loud buzz from my phone pulled me out of my thoughts. "Claire?" "Scarlett," she began, her voice tight with a mix of urgency and impatience. "Nathan Blake's here. He's waiting for you in your office. Should I tell him to leave? Nathan Blake. I closed my eyes briefly, already knowing why he was here. The moonstone amulet. Of course he'd come to grovel. No, I said after a pause. Tell him I'll be there in an hour. Got it, Claire replied before hanging up. I barely had time to set my phone down before it buzzed again. This time, the number was unfamiliar. Curious, I unlocked it, only for irritation to spike through me like a blade. Unknown number. I've finally chosen the perfect roses for the seaside mansion. Alexander says they'll pair beautifully with the European artwork I've selected. My fingers gripped the phone tighter. Grace. I wanted to ignore her, to let her childish taunts go unanswered. But the text burned in my mind, and my fingers moved of their own accord. Congratulations on your imagination, Grace. Too bad that mansion won't have you or your art. Her reply came swiftly, laced with arrogance. Grace, you're just jealous. Alexander cares about me, and you can't stand it. Maybe if you weren't so cold and unlovable, he wouldn't have tried to replace you. I scoffed, the audacity of her words almost laughable. If only she knew how little I cared for Alexander's devotion. Me. Your confidence is amusing. Why don't we make this interesting? $1 million bet says you'll never set foot in that mansion. There was a pause. I could practically feel her hesitation through the screen, but I wasn't worried. Grace was desperate. Desperate. More desperate than she wanted anyone to realize, and desperation made people predictable. Grace. Fine. A bet it is. By the time I'm moving in, you'll be the one paying me. I smirked, already envisioning her reaction when she realized she'd walked into a trap. Me. Better not back out. But just in case, remember, Alexander doesn't know about your little transactions with Thomas Ward. One word from me, and your whole lie falls apart. Her response didn't matter. I'd already won, and Grace would realize it soon enough. By the time I arrived at the healing center, my irritation had dulled, replaced by a sense of focus. Claire greeted me at the entrance, her expression composed, but her eyes giving away a flicker of relief. You're going to need all the patience in the world, she whispered. I raised a brow. That bad? She merely nodded, motioning toward my office before walking away briskly. When I stepped inside, Nathan Blake was waiting, his polished and poised exterior doing little to hide the nervous energy radiating from him. Scarlett, he began, his tone warm but strained. It's good to see you. Chapter 102, Sacred Gifts and Pack Politics. I stormed into my office, the tension of the day wrapping around me like an unwelcome guest. My handbag hit the couch with a soft thud, drawing Nathan's attention like a wolf spotting prey. His eyes flicked to the designer logo briefly, his brow furrowing ever so slightly. I saw that look. That exact look. Great, another alpha who thinks I'm some spoiled brat playing dress-up as a healer. The skepticism in his face only added to my already sour mood. Do you like the bag, Nathan? I asked, my voice louder than I intended. His eyes snapped up to meet mine. He looked like a deer caught in headlights. What? No, I mean, it's a nice bag, I suppose. I tilted my head, resting my hand on the desk. It's yours if it'll stop you staring holes into it. My tone was sharp, though a faint smirk tugged at my lips for good measure. He straightened, brushing off my remark with a forced chuckle. Thank you, but no. That's not why I'm here. Then why are you here, Nathan? I pushed. Because if you're about to say pack politics, I just might scream. Nathan hesitated, and then, because of course this was my life, he pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket and placed it on the desk between us. His movements were slow, deliberate, almost as if the box contained something far more dangerous than whatever ridiculous trinket he was about to beg me to return. Not this again, I muttered, staring at the box like it had personally offended me. He cleared his throat but said nothing at first, just standing there rigidly. I crossed my arms, waiting for his explanation. Finally he spoke. Scarlett, it seems there's been a mistake. Really? I muttered, leaning back in my chair. My tone dripped with sarcasm. Do tell. Nathan took a deep breath. The last time I came here, I left this, he gestured to the box, under false pretenses. The item you received, a moonstone amulet, wasn't the gift it was meant to be. I froze, my suspicions immediately flaring. Let me get this straight, I began slowly. You're saying you handed me a sacred artifact of your pack, by accident? He flinched slightly, but held his ground. Yes, he admitted, his tone clipped. A sharp, humorless laugh escaped from me. He wasn't joking. Oh, wow, Nathan. That's fantastic. Truly top-tier planning. What was the real gift, then? A coupon for free buffet passes? Nathan's jaw tightened, but his tension had a different edge to it now. Beneath his pride, I could see real concern. This isn't a laughing matter, he said finally. That amulet is not something I can afford to lose. I didn't just fail to explain it to you. It was never supposed to leave my possession, period. It's sacred to my bloodline, Scarlet. Something about his tone made me pause, my humor fading. His desperation wasn't something I could ignore. Why is this my problem? I asked quietly. My voice had lost its edge. Because you have it, he said, his voice gaining urgency. No, Nathan, I corrected, looking him dead in the eye. I had it. Roman saw it. His face instantly paled and his hands curled into fists. Roman saw it? And threw it away, I added quickly. Nathan's expression shifted from shock to horror to barely concealed rage in a matter of seconds. He threw it. His voice cut off and he inhaled sharply, quickly, clearly struggling to hold himself together. Are you telling me Roman discarded one of the most sacred artifacts in my pack's history? Like it was trash? You'll start yelling, Nathan, and I'm ending this conversation, I warned him, my annoyance flaring again. Nathan's nostrils flared, but he reeled himself back. Barely. You could have stopped him. Could I have? I shot back, standing up and leaning forward over my desk. You think I stood a chance of stopping an Alpha King when he was holding something he thought was a threat? It wasn't a threat, Nathan nearly shouted, then pinched the bridge of his nose as he moved closer to my desk. It was a misunderstanding. You could have explained to him. I didn't know it was a mistake, I exploded, all my frustration spilling out at once. I threw my arms out. Do you get that? You didn't tell me it was an accident. You just handed it to me and let me deal with the fallout. He blinked at my outburst, a crack forming in his confident facade. For a moment, silence filled the room, thick with tension. Where is it? Nathan finally asked, his voice low and tightly controlled. I gestured to my office trash can, now sitting empty in the corner. Gone, I said flatly. Nathan turned to Claire, who lingered at the office entrance. What about the trash? Where is it taken from here? Claire hesitated, clearly startled by the question. The staff handles it. Daily. It's picked up along with the regular. Nathan clenched his jaw tighter, the tendons in his neck straining. And did anyone notice anything unusual yesterday? Anything at all? Claire quickly shook her head. No, nothing. Nathan swore softly, his hand running roughly through his hair. His wolf was dangerously close to surfacing. That much was evident. I had enough. That's it, I said, slamming my hand down onto my desk. This is not going to help. You need to calm down. Calm down? Nathan repeated, stepping closer as his eyes narrowed. You think this is something I can just calm down about? Yes, I snapped, because losing it isn't the end of the world. Not for you, he growled, but for me, it could cost my pack everything. Before the tension could boil over further, Nathan took a deep breath, closing his eyes. Scarlet, he said softly, his tone now pleading. I need you to talk to Roman. Whatever misunderstanding happened, explain that it was a mistake. Get the amulet back. My arms dropped to my sides, exasperation taking over. Do you hear yourself? Explain to Roman? You think I've got a magic wand to make him calm down about this? You're his mate, Nathan said simply. His words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. I hated that he was right. Roman's protectiveness over me was absolute, and while that gave me certain advantages, it also meant I bore the brunt of his temper when things went south. Fine, I said begrudgingly, snatching my phone off the desk. But if Roman flips, the blood's on your hands, not mine. Nathan froze, his confidence faltering with my words. He clearly hadn't expected me to call Roman on the spot. You're calling him now? He asked, his voice a mixture of shock and panic. I didn't bother answering as I dialed. The phone barely rang twice before Roman's deep, familiar voice filled the room. Little Wolf, he greeted me warmly, his tone soft and inviting, so different from the tension suffocating my office. What's wrong? I swallowed the sudden lump in my throat, meeting Nathan's wide eyes as I spoke. Brother? I said cautiously, my voice holding steady. Nathan Blake has come to get his amulet back. Nathan's face immediately drained of blood, his previous frustration swallowed up by outright horror. Chapter 103, Sacred Claims. My pulse quickened the moment Scarlett reached for her phone. A knot of dread tightened in my chest as her delicate fingers danced over the screen, her expression unreadable. "Let me call him," Scarlett said, her voice calm but firm, almost indifferent. And then she did the one thing I feared the most. She put Roman Thorne on speakerphone. Panic swirled within me, but I forced myself to remain composed. I had to. My pack's survival might very well depend on it. The line rang once, twice, and then, too soon, his voice came through, dark and commanding. "Little Wolf?" Roman's voice was deceptively calm, carrying an undertone so sharp it could cut through steel. "What is it?" Scarlett, unfazed, spoke with surprising ease. "Roman, Nathan came to collect the amulet you threw out. Apparently it was given to me by mistake." There was a prolonged silence on the other end, the kind that made my palms slick with sweat. The weight of Roman's silence felt like being dragged under water, unable to breathe. Finally his voice returned, sharper now, deadly. "Nathan Blake," he said, testing my name on his tongue like one would examine a curse. "I suggest you leave, immediately." The finality in his words sent a chill down my spine. My throat tightened as I tried and failed to find my voice. "He's still here," Scarlett added, glancing at me, her expression carefully neutral. Roman's sigh rumbled through the phone like a distant storm. "Tell him," he continued, deliberate and slow, "to leave now, or I will ensure he regrets staying a second longer." Every muscle in my body tensed. It wasn't just a warning. It was a promise. Understood, I barely able to mask the tremor in my voice. The echo of Roman's authority felt suffocating even from a distance. Scarlett ended the call with a quick tap. The silence that followed was deafening. My pulse hammered in my ears, and for a moment it felt like the room was closing in on me. She looked up at me, still impossibly composed. "There you have it," she said. No hint of malice, no gloating, just words, plain and indifferent. And yet, her calmness made me feel even smaller under Roman's looming threat. I cleared my throat, trying to feign steadiness. "Thank you, Scarlett." My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. "For addressing this." She gave a faint nod, her emerald eyes cool and detached. "Make sure it doesn't happen again." I swallowed hard, feeling each word like a nail sealing my coffin. Scarlett wasn't accusing or blaming me directly, but her tone left no room for doubt. My situation, already precarious, had just taken a turn for the worse. I watched Nathan shift uneasily, his carefully polished demeanor cracking. His discomfort was palpable, and for all his usual charm, I could see the cracks forming in his composure. "Thanks again," Nathan said, his voice strained as he gathered himself to leave. Before he could reach the door, I stopped him. "Wait." He turned back, his guarded expression slipping just enough to betray how much tension he was holding in. I reached into my desk drawer and retrieved the replacement artifact he'd brought, the ornate box he'd hoped would make up for the amulet. I held it out to him. "Take it," I said simply. "I can't keep this." Nathan's brow furrowed as if he'd expected a different response. "It's meant as an apology," he countered, his voice softer now, almost pleading, "for the confusion." I shook my head firmly. "Roman doesn't allow me to accept gifts from alphas." My tone was final. "You don't want me breaking his rules." Nathan hesitated, his hand twitching slightly as though unsure whether to reach for the box. "Scarlett, Take it," I repeated, cutting him off. My voice left no room for argument. With visible reluctance, he reached out and retrieved the box. For a fleeting moment, I thought he might try to argue again, but instead, he relented. "Fine," he muttered, his shoulders sagging slightly. He held the box tightly as if it were a lifeline, then glanced back at me. "Sophie," he began, his voice trailing off. He seemed to wrestle internally before finally continuing. "She's confined to pack grounds now." I tilted my head, unimpressed by his attempt to bring up Sophie's situation. "Forget it," I said coolly. My reply seemed to knock the wind out of him. He flinched, clearly unsettled, but before he could say anything else, I gestured toward the door. "That's all, Nathan," I said, my voice dismissive. He opened his mouth as if to protest, but then he thought better of it. Without another word, he turned and walked out, leaving behind a trail of tension like the scent of rain before a thunderstorm. After Nathan left, Claire entered, holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. She placed one on my desk before plopping into the chair across from me. "Well," she said, drawing the word out like a dramatic sigh, "that was something." I arched an eyebrow, taking a sip of my coffee. What do you mean? She leaned forward, her expression curiously speculative. Nathan's whole story about the mixed-up amulet? Are we sure it's not some elaborate excuse? I mean, what are the odds? I set my coffee down and met her gaze calmly. The amulet was ridiculously valuable, I said. Too valuable to be a casual mistake. He wouldn't risk giving it away to anyone unless he truly didn't know what it was. Claire tapped her fingers against the armrest thoughtfully. Still, it's convenient, don't you think? You've got to admit it looks suspicious. I shrugged. Whether it's suspicious or not, it doesn't matter. Roman already handled it. That seemed to satisfy her, at least temporarily. She nodded, standing up and stretching. Fair enough, she said. Want me to bring in those herb inventory reports later? I waved her off. Later. For now, just take a break. As she left, my phone buzzed on the desk. Roman's name flashed across the screen, the image of his icy blue eyes suddenly vivid in my mind. I picked up the call and his voice came through smooth and direct. Nathan left? Yes, I confirmed, leaning against the desk. He didn't stay long. And the artifact? Roman asked, his tone turning sharp. I sat up straight. I gave it back, I assured him. Just like you said, no exceptions. There was a beat of silence on his end, followed by a low hum of approval. You're learning, he said, his tone softer now. Yet, despite the casual warmth beneath his words, there was still that edge of possessiveness, an alpha's claim. Feeling emboldened by his approval, I ventured cautiously. So, does that rule apply to everyone, or just alphas? He didn't respond immediately, and I could almost picture the smirk forming on his lips as he drew out the silence. Finally, he asked, Why? Are you worried about receiving something from me? The question was so unexpected, so effortlessly personal, that I felt my entire face flush. That's not what I meant, I stammered. His chuckle came through the line, deep and rich, and it sent a warm shiver down my spine. Relax, little wolf, he said. You should know by now. I don't need rules to stop me from giving you what I want. I bit my lip, unable to think of a single coherent response. His words left me flustered, a mixture of fiery embarrassment and an aching anticipation I didn't dare admit. I'll call you later, he said, his voice tinged with amusement. Try to keep out of trouble until then. And just like that, he hung up, leaving me staring at the phone, my mind spinning. Chapter 104, Sacred Claims and Shadow Threats. Alpha Blake, this is unacceptable. Richard Stone's voice exploded through the phone, cold and seething with authority. It was the kind of tone that demanded submission. I slapped a hand over my eyes and let out a slow, controlled breath. The last thing I needed was Richard pushing me deeper into a corner. I told you, I'm handling it, I bit out, pacing the length of my office to keep my mind from snapping under the pressure. Handling it? Richard snapped with incredulity. The Moonstone amulet must be returned for the sacred moon ceremony next week. Do you realize how vital this artifact is to our pack? You cannot afford mistakes. My teeth clenched as his words stabbed deeper and deeper. A mistake? Calling it a mistake barely scratched the surface of what I'd done. Handing Roman's mate the most sacred item of our pack wasn't just a misstep. It was catastrophic. Richard, calm down, I said, though my patience was razor thin. I'll retrieve it in time. You don't need to worry. Retrieve it? He barked. There was a heavy pause, and I could hear his disbelief in the silence. Tell me you didn't give it away in some foolish attempt to impress. That's not what happened, I shot back, my voice sharp enough to cut steel. My fists were clenched at my sides. The situation is under control. And what should I tell the elders, Nathan? Richard demanded, refusing to let up. That our alpha, our leader, managed to lose the most sacred artifact of our history? That the elders' trust was misplaced? Tell me, what would you have me say? Tell them nothing, I barked, my patience finally cracking. I'll deal with it my way. Just give me the time I need. Another pause stretched across the line. Finally, Richard exhaled sharply. You'd better, he said coldly. His disapproval was practically dripping through the phone. Fix this before it's too late. The call cut off, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. My jaw ached from how tightly I'd been grinding my teeth. I pressed a fist against my temple, trying and failing to clear my head. There was no salvaging this with the elders. They'd find out sooner or later. But first, I'd have to face Roman. The mere thought sent a pang of unease crawling through my chest. I didn't have a choice. At the neutral meeting grounds, I stepped out of my car with John trailing behind me. The building ahead was simple and foreboding, with its walls of steel and stone. Functionality took precedence here. It wasn't about flair, but power. The enforcer standing at the entrance was built like a tank. His sharp, watchful gaze locked onto me instantly. "Alpha Blake," he said firmly, respectful yet cold. There was no bow, no unnecessary pleasantries, just business. I nodded briefly and met his gaze. "Let Roman know I need to speak with him. It's urgent." The enforcer didn't flinch. His expression didn't shift. "Appointments are required," I frowned. "This can't wait. He'll understand once he hears what it's about." But the enforcer remained unfazed. "Protocol doesn't change, Alpha. You'll wait your turn." I felt a flicker of frustration, but forced myself to stay calm. Roman was infamous for his methods, and his followers took after him. And what if I don't have time to wait? The enforcer's eyes narrowed, his posture subtly changing. "Then you don't proceed." John the Fool stepped forward. "Perhaps a gesture of goodwill could speed this along," he muttered as he reached into his jacket for a bribe. A fat envelope he thought could bend the rules. I gritted my teeth and hissed through them. "Stop that! Now! Foolish! Absolutely foolish! What kind of ot tried to bribe one of Roman Thorne's men?" The enforcer shifted, his stance calm yet intimidating. "Alpha, you can test your luck," he said, a warning laced in his voice. "But I suggest you don't insult us again." I shot a glare at John, who quickly backed off, his face pale. The air was heavy with tension, and the weight of Roman's presence, even in his absence, was suffocating. "Fine," I muttered reluctantly, stepping back. "I'll wait." Hunter strode into the room, his movements calm yet precise. His timing was never accidental. If he had interrupted, it likely meant something of value or irritation. I leaned back in my chair, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. The faint hum of conversation echoed in the background, but my attention remained on Eric Blackwood. "Speak," I said simply, tilting my head ever so slightly toward Hunter. "Alpha Blake is here," he said in his usual composed tone. I raised an eyebrow, mildly intrigued. "Blake again?" Bold, even for him. Hunter's face betrayed no reaction. "He insists it's urgent." Of course he did. My lips twitched in mild amusement. Nathan Blake had a knack for stumbling into messes he couldn't untangle himself from. "Let him wait," I said mildly, dismissing the thought for now. My attention returned to Eric. Across from me, Eric's sharp eyes glinted with interest. "Does he know you would rather crush him than grant him forgiveness?" Eric asked coolly, leaning back with an amused smirk. "It doesn't matter what he knows," I replied, my voice calm, cold. "If he's here, that means he's desperate. Desperation will deal the blow more effectively than I ever could." Eric chuckled quietly, swirling his own drink. "I do admire your methods, efficient and ruthless. It reminds me of how you handled Lucas Gray." Lucas Gray. His name brought a flicker of irritation, a pest I thought I'd dealt with long ago. "He's meddling again?" I asked, my tone void of emotion. Eric nodded. "He's initiated contact with a well-known silver arms dealer in Europe. Rumor has it, he's aiming to level the playing field." "Level the playing field?" I said coldly. My grip on the glass tightened slightly. "He still thinks he has one." Eric smirked faintly. "Apparently he hasn't learned, but I suppose we all have our blind spots. Even rogues believe themselves invincible at times." "If Lucas steps foot near my territory," I said quietly but firmly, "I won't hesitate. There won't be anything left of him to admire his courage or his stupidity." "And your mate?" Eric asked, his tone deceptively casual. "He wouldn't be bold enough to target her directly, would he?" My ice-blue eyes flashed as I met Eric's gaze. The fury that burned beneath the surface of my calm exterior was evident. "If he so much as breathes her name," I said slowly, "I'll show him that his playing field doesn't matter at all." Eric raised his glass in mock toast. "Fair enough, but for now." He trailed off, eyeing Hunter as he entered again. The waiting was unbearable. Seated in the neutral territory's sterile reception, every second that passed made my skin crawl. John shifted uncomfortably beside me, glancing at the unmoving door to Roman's office. "What do you think is taking this long? Is it part of his strategy, to make us sweat?" "It's obvious," I muttered darkly, my gaze fixed on a distant spot. "Roman didn't make anyone wait by accident. It was deliberate." It was a psychological game, one he enjoyed playing, and one I had no choice but to endure. John crossed his arms, his discomfort clear. "Do you think there's a way to," he hesitated, "to smooth things over? Maybe territory concessions, or some kind of agreement he might find valuable?" I cut my eyes toward him, my patience thin. "The Blake pack has nothing Roman wants." My voice was laced with frustration. "Do you honestly believe a man like him can be swayed with meaningless trade-offs?" John fell silent, and the room returned to its eerie, stifling quiet. I swallowed hard, clearing my throat as I tried to keep my anxiety from swallowing me whole. Chapter 105: Sacred Gifts and Shadow Kings. The private club in the neutral zone buzzed with low voices, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Wolves of different ranks lounged around, pretending they had no worries while scheming behind veiled smiles. But I wasn't there for pleasantries or alliances. My chest burned with the weight of my mistake, the kind that made my palms sweat and my mind race with no solution in sight. As I stepped in, I quickly spotted Eric Blackwood in his usual corner, reclining like he was king of the world. His dark suit fit him perfectly, and his confident smirk radiated a calm, measured arrogance. If Eric Blackwood was known for anything, it was his ability to thrive in chaos. He thrived so much, in fact, that chaos often seemed to follow him as naturally as the night followed day. I approached him, each step feeling heavier as I prepared to admit something that could ruin my reputation. Eric's sharp blue eyes instantly locked onto me, curious and intrigued. "Nathan Blake!" Eric's voice rang out, dripping with amusement. He lifted his glass to me as if I were an old friend. "What brings you here? Don't tell me you finally decided to indulge in a real drink?" I didn't sit yet. My hands clenched at my side as I forced a tight smile. "I need to talk to you. There's been a mistake." Eric chuckled and motioned to the seat across from him, his auburn hair catching the dim light. He savored his drink as though my growing discomfort was part of his entertainment. "A mistake? From you? Now that's rare. Let me guess. Something to do with those alliances you've been chasing?" I hesitated for a moment, debating how much to reveal. But there was no sidestepping it. Eric would find out eventually. "It's bigger than that," I admitted. My jaw tightened, the words nearly sticking to my throat. I accidentally gave away my pack's sacred moonstone amulet to Roman's mate. A beat of silence passed. Eric blinked once, then twice, before bursting into laughter that echoed loudly through the club. Nearby conversation hushed as curious eyes flicked toward him. He clearly didn't care. "Roman's mate?" Eric drawled, leaning forward as his laughter softened into a sharp grin. "Roman Thorn, the Shadow King? You're telling me he has a mate?" He didn't wait for my answer, continuing on like I'd just told him the most delicious piece of gossip. "And you gave her what? The sacred moonstone amulet? You, Nathan Blake, made such a rookie move?" Eric clapped his hand on the table, clearly enjoying this. "Laugh all you want," I shot back, my voice sharp. "Do you have any idea what this could mean for my pack?" "Roman threw the amulet away. The pack elders will tear me apart if they realize it." But Eric ignored my frustration, his sharp grin only widening. His curiosity zeroed in on Roman's newly revealed mate. "Who is she?" he asked almost lazily. "No one important, I assume?" "She's Scarlet Winters," I said through gritted teeth. Eric froze mid-sip. For once, I'd successfully stunned him. His drink hovered near his lips while his eyes widened in disbelief. "Scarlet Winters?" he repeated slowly, drawing out every syllable like he had to taste the name before processing it. "Yes," I confirmed impatiently, wishing he'd stop dragging this out. The shock faded from his face, replaced by an almost gleeful curiosity. "Scarlet Winters, as in the disgraced true daughter of the Winter Pack, discarded by her own family. That Scarlet Winters?" "Yes," I growled, evenly meeting his gaze. "And the same Scarlet who humiliated Alexander Amber by rejecting his mark?" His grin widened into a full smile now, his excitement utterly unhidden. "Oh, this just keeps getting better." I didn't meet his eyes, the reminder of Scarlet's rejection stinging more deeply than I wanted to admit. "Correct," I said tightly. "She rejected him, not the other way around." "Even better," Eric mused. He leaned back in his seat, spinning his glass in his hand as he digested the information. "So you're telling me that Roman Thorn, the most dangerous wolf alive, has claimed Scarlet Winters as his mate. And Scarlet, who Alexander once tried to claim, ended up with someone infinitely more powerful. He chuckled, leaning forward again. Oh, the delicious irony. This isn't funny, I snapped, clenching my fists. Do you realize what Roman's retaliation will mean for my pack? Eric's grin disappeared slightly, though the flicker of amusement never left his sharp eyes. I see your point, but tell me this. Why hasn't Scarlet revealed her connection to Roman yet? She doesn't need to, I replied bitterly. The Winter Pack cast her aside for Grace. They don't deserve Scarlet's support, and she knows it. At my words, Eric hummed thoughtfully, his sharp mind already racing ahead. Then the Winter Pack is even more foolish than I thought. He downed the rest of his drink and smiled darkly. Poor Alexander. I wonder how he'll handle the news. Back at the beachfront mansion, I sat with my phone in hand, debating whether to call Roman after Nathan's pointless visit. Nathan's desperation had been obvious. He was practically trembling when Roman dismissed his concerns earlier, but I felt no pity. Too many times, people like Nathan tried to use me as a stepping stone, and I was tired of playing someone else's savior. Finally, giving in, I dialed, and Roman's deep voice came through almost immediately. Little wolf, he greeted me warmly, and my heart fluttered despite myself. What's on your mind? Nathan Blake, I said straight away, wasting no time. He asked me to return that replacement artifact. I told him no, of course. I paused. You're not mad, are you? Roman chuckled softly, his voice rich with amusement. Mad? Nathan Blake comes crawling to you and you put him in his place. How could I be mad? Relieved, I laughed quietly. Good, because I don't think he'll bother me again, not after what you said. He didn't respond immediately, though I could hear the smile in his tone when he finally spoke. You handled him well, Scarlet. I hung up moments later, my chest lighter knowing Roman wasn't upset. But the relief faded as I noticed 2 missed calls from unidentified numbers. I didn't need to guess. They were from Sarah and Grace. The thought of them steeled my nerves all over again. Then my phone rang again, but this time the caller ID gave me some relief. Emma. Scarlet! Emma's bubbly voice came through the line, though a trace of exasperation followed. You won't believe this. The Winter Pack is going insane looking for healers. I grinned despite myself. Let me guess. They've tried to drag you into their mess? They've been harassing me non-stop, Emma replied dryly. Calls, messages, you name it. But don't worry, Hunter made it clear I don't owe them anything. I leaned back, my smile darkening. Good. Keep them desperate. Let them sweat. Emma hesitated. Do you think Grace will even survive long enough to pay the $1 million you two bet on? I laughed, the idea sounding less and less plausible. She'll probably die trying to scrape together the money first. Emma snorted. Fair point. Seriously, though, they're desperate. Alexander's even been calling Aiden Walsh. I paused at that. And Aiden? He's avoiding the calls, Emma said, her voice laced with amusement. And we both know Grace couldn't handle any treatment, even if he showed up. I clenched the edge of my desk. The image of Sarah pleading, Grace's desperation. It all played out in my mind as satisfying as a bittersweet symphony. After ending the call, some nagging thought made me redial Emma's number. Scarlet? She answered, sounding surprised. What's up? Dinner tonight? I asked casually. There was a long pause. Then, with a laugh that carried both joy and a warning, she said, You better hope Roman doesn't find out you're sneaking away. We both know how possessive he is. I rolled my eyes, unable to stop the small grin forming. He's busy with pack business tonight. He won't care. All right then, Emma relented. Pick me up at 7. And Scarlet? I hope Roman really is busy. But if not, good luck. With that, she ended the call, leaving me both amused and slightly wary of how Roman might take the news. Chapter 106, Dangerous Claims, Roman's POV. The room was heavy with tension. Nathan Blake sat before me, his posture unnaturally straight, his jaw tense as sweat glistened faintly on his brow. Eric Blackwood, ever the amused spectator, leaned back comfortably in his chair beside him. His sharp chuckle earlier still hung in the air. Nathan looked anywhere but directly at me, though I could feel his wolf fighting to submit under the weight of my gaze. The silence stretched between us as I lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating my expression. I exhaled slowly, the smoke curling between us like a predator circling its prey. My icy blue eyes locked onto Nathan, and I didn't move a muscle. You've caused problems, Blake, I said, my voice quiet but firm. the kind of quiet that made wolves tremble. "Tell me why you're here, wasting my time again." His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. Even sitting there, an alpha like him couldn't quite meet my eyes without faltering. "Alpha Thorn," he began, carefully choosing his words. "I want to personally clarify the incident with the Moonstone amulet." My smile was humorless as I leaned back, blowing another plume of smoke his way. "Clarify? What's left to clarify, Blake? You made a mistake, or so you claim. What exactly do you think explaining will achieve now?" "It wasn't intentional. Intentions mean nothing here." I cut him off smoothly. My voice dropped lower, ice dripping from every word. "You think I care why you did it? You handed a sacred artifact to my mate and tossed your problems into my lap." Nathan's shoulders visibly stiffened, his hands clenched into fists before he relaxed them quickly, trying to mask his nervousness. Eric's amusement only made the situation worse for him. "Alpha Thorn," Nathan started again, his voice quieter this time. "There was no romantic intent, I swear it. It was simply a mishandling of the artifact." My narrowed gaze pinned him where he sat. "Mishandling," I echoed dryly, letting the word linger in the air. "Then why do you look so desperate to fix it, Blake? Sacred or not, it sounds like you've allowed something far more valuable to slip away. Or is it the misplaced impression you gave that has you panicking?" He shook his head quickly, his face pale. "No, Alpha Thorn. It's not about appearances. The amulet is crucial for our pact ceremonies. It was recognized as a mistake by my elders, and I humbly ask for its return to prevent further misunderstandings." The fear lacing his voice was almost satisfying. Almost. I turned slightly to glance at Eric, who was grinning as he swirled his glass. Leave it to him to find entertainment in another alpha's misery. He raised an eyebrow at me but said nothing. "Do you hear this, Blackwood?" I said, my tone betraying faint amusement. "This alpha is worried about misunderstandings after delivering a sacred artifact to one of the most closely guarded women in the Eastern Territories." Eric laughed outright now, the sound sharp and grating. I thought Blake didn't get himself tangled in theatrics, but I guess even he's not immune to stupidity. Nathan bristled slightly, but he didn't rise to Eric's bait. "Wise." "I've already confined Sophie," Nathan said quickly, but as though offering more proof of his control. "She won't interfere with Scarlet or cause complications." His voice wavered slightly, as if he was praying this declaration would help his case. I studied him a moment, saying nothing. Then I took the cigarette from my lips, stubbing it out with deliberate force against the tray. His eyes flicked to my hand nervously before darting back up. "You've done one thing right then," I said darkly. "But let me make something very clear. If any of this complication causes even a fraction of discomfort to Scarlet, what you're imagining might happen will be far easier than the reality. Do you understand me, Nathan Blake?" His nod was frantic. "Yes, Alpha Thorn, completely." A beat of silence passed between us. "Good," I said with finality. I leaned forward slightly, making sure my words struck the right place. "Now get out of my sight." He stood so quickly his chair nearly toppled, mumbling another quick assurance before scurrying out like prey escaping a predator's gaze. Eric, meanwhile, watched the whole scene as though it were theater. "He's terrified of you," Eric commented once Nathan was out of earshot. "He should be," I replied, standing. My voice was laced with steel as my thoughts flickered briefly back to Scarlet. I sat at my desk, flipping through patient files that now felt like endless busywork. My mind was elsewhere, thinking of everything but the charts staring back at me. Roman's earlier possessiveness still had my nerves stretched thin, even though I understood how he operated. My phone buzzed on the desk beside me. His name flashed on the screen, and I groaned under my breath. "Hello," I said, already bracing myself. "Little Wolf," Roman greeted, his tone warm but firm. "What are you doing?" "Working," I replied curtly. "Not anymore," he said flatly. "Cancel it." My eyebrows furrowed. "I cancel what? Do you hear yourself? I'm busy, Roman." "Lunch," was all he said. I blinked. "What?" "You heard me," he said smoothly. "I'll pick you up in 30 minutes. Wear something comfortable." "For what?" I snapped, irritation creeping into my tone. "A restaurant," he answered easily, "with dancing werewolves." "What?" "You'll like it," he added before I could argue further. "Don't argue. See you soon." And just like that, the line went dead. I slammed the phone back down, muttering to myself about his audacity. He hadn't even asked if I was free, just demanded. With a sigh, I quickly dialed Emma. She answered on the second ring. "Let me guess," she said, her voice dry. "Roman?" "Yep," I replied, sinking into my chair. "You're canceling on me?" she asked, her tone mocking. "For him?" "Don't start," I warned. "Independent Scarlet really let herself go, huh?" Emma teased. "What happened to standing your ground with possessive alphas? I recall you promising those days were over." I rolled my eyes, my frustration tempered by the faintest smirk. "Zero. It's just lunch," I muttered, ending the call before she could tease further. The mood at the healing center was as tense as ever when Alexander strode in like a storm, his expression furious and his energy practically vibrating with restrained rage. I sighed inwardly. Of course, it would be him. "Scarlet," he barked, moving toward me at the end of the hall. I stood my ground, meeting his glare with an icy calm. "Alexander, what now?" He didn't waste time. "What will it take to bring Aiden and Hazel back? Do you even care that Grace is dying?" His voice surged with anger, his hands balled into fists at his sides. I didn't flinch. "Why should I care?" I asked, my tone sharper than ice. His face reddened, veins bulging at his temples. "Sarah raised you. You owe her respect at the very least." I let out a cold laugh, crossing my arms. "Respect? From the woman who favored an impostor over her own blood? Spare me. I owe her nothing." "Sarah," he surged closer, his towering frame casting a shadow over mine. "She is still your mother." "No," I snapped. "She isn't. She stopped being that the second she chose Grace over me. Her problems are her own now." "You have no idea what this means for our pack," he growled, his teeth gritted. "And I don't care," I said bluntly. "Your pack means nothing to me anymore, Alexander, just like you." His rage boiled over. He grabbed my arm roughly, his grip powerful and almost bruising. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You will fix it." The sound of his voice pushed me to my breaking point. I yanked my arm free with enough force to make him stagger. "Fix it yourself," I snarled. "Take your pathetic anger and aim it somewhere else." When he didn't move, still glaring like he had a right to demand anything from me, I raised my hand and struck him hard across the face. The sharp cock echoed in the hall. Alexander stumbled back, clutching his cheek as he looked at me in disbelief. "Scarlet!" he bellowed, his voice hoarse with fury. "Try something again," I said coldly, not breaking eye contact. "And I swear I'll show you just how wrong you are to cross me." Chapter 107. Dangerous Claims. Taking a steadying breath, I grabbed my bag and moved to leave. The last thing I needed was more pack drama for the day. But just as I stepped out, a firm grip latched onto my wrist, halting me mid-stride. "Scarlet, we're not finished," Alexander said. His voice was low but carried that trademark entitlement I'd grown to detest over the years. I turned my gaze to him, unimpressed, and calmly attempted to pull my arm away. "We've been done for years, Alexander. Move," I replied sharply. But he held on, tighter now. His eyes bore into me, frustration and something darker lurking beneath the surface. "You think you can keep ignoring me?" he demanded. "I'm here about the alliances. You can't dismiss this." "Watch me," I shot back, yanking my arm once more. This time his grip weakened slightly, but still he persisted. "I saw Nathan leaving earlier. What did he want? Are you working with his pack now?" His accusations were wild, his tone accusatory. I sighed heavily, already feeling a headache brewing. "Nathan's business with me is none of your concern. Let me go," I said each word deliberately, my emerald eyes narrowing as irritation flared. Alexander stepped closer, his grip still not relinquishing. But before he could utter another word, my patience snapped. Without hesitation, I drew on my wolf's strength and struck him with my free hand. My fist connected with his jaw in a solid punch that sent him staggering backward. His hand flew to his face, and for a brief moment I saw the shock in his eyes. He wasn't used to me fighting back. "Want more?" I asked coldly, my head as I flexed my fingers. My wolf, Cora, stirred beneath my skin, pushing me to deliver more blows, but I held her back, for now. Alexander steadied himself, his gaze now more focused. But it wasn't my words or my punch that had shaken him. No, it was something else. His eyes drifted lower, his sharp gaze catching on the scarf wrapped snugly around my neck. It must have shifted when I moved. The corner of his lips twitched, not into his usual smirk, but into something closer to disbelief. "Scarlet," he said, his voice quieter but thick with barely contained rage. "What's that on your neck?" I blinked, momentarily caught off guard by his focus. His expression shifted from anger to something primal as his pupils dilated. Before I could react, his hand shot out, grabbing the edge of my scarf and yanking it away. The air between us seemed to freeze. The claiming marks, the evidence of Roman. There they were, clearly visible to him now, dark against my pale skin. For a moment, Alexander didn't say anything. His breath hitched as his wolf Mason growled low in his chest. The fury in his gaze burned, his jealousy unmistakable. "You," he started, his words faltering as his jaw clenched. But I wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of a response. "Get a grip, Alexander," I said flatly, reaching down to retrieve my scarf. But before I could, the sound of heavy footsteps filled the hallway, and then he arrived. Alexander's... I couldn't breathe. My chest heaved as my wolf howled furiously within me. The marks were undeniable, Roman Thorn's marks, shamelessly displayed on Scarlett's delicate neck. My mind raced with the implications. Rumors of her mysterious protector had swirled for days, but seeing the evidence firsthand twisted my insides with an unbearable rage. "Who did this to you?" I snarled, my voice trembling with suppressed fury. But before she could respond or deny it, the heavy, distinct scent of power filled the room. I turned, and I knew instinctively what was coming. Roman Thorn. The alpha of the Thorn pack stepped forward, his ice-blue eyes locking onto me like a predator sizing up prey. "What are you doing here?" Scarlett asked, clearly surprised by his sudden appearance. He didn't answer her right away. His gaze flickered briefly to her, softening, before turning deadly cold once again as it settled on me. "You're lucky she landed the first blow," he said, his words calculated and calm. Then, faster than I could react, he closed the distance. His knee drove into my ribs, sending me backward into the wall. Pain shot through my side, a sickening accompanying the impact. "You," I started, but his presence was suffocating. Mason roared in my chest, but against Roman, against the sheer weight of his dominance, it was futile. "I let you off easily the first time," Roman said, his voice dripping with contempt as he loomed over me. "Touch her again, and I'll rip your arm off this time." His tone left no room for argument. He was serious. I struggled to my feet, but the sharp pain in my ribs reminded me how outmatched I was. Scarlett stood to the side, her expression unreadable, though her emerald eyes gleamed with something close to satisfaction. "You think you're untouchable?" I spat, ignoring the ache in my chest. My pride was wounded more than anything else. Roman didn't bother responding. Instead, he turned his back on me, focusing entirely on Scarlett. "Where's your coat?" he asked her, his voice dropping into something softer. "It's freezing out, and you're dressed like this?" She opened her mouth, likely to protest, but he shrugged off his own coat and draped it over her shoulders. His scent overwhelmed mine instantly, aggravating Mason further. "You bastard," I growled through gritted teeth. Roman turned back to me, one brow raised. "Did you say something?" I balled my fists, summoning all the strength I had left, but before I could launch myself at him, Scarlett's voice cut through the tension. "I think he's learned his lesson," she said carefully, placing a hand on Roman's arm. His icy gaze lingered on me for a moment longer before he smirked. "No," he replied simply, and then the weight of his dominance pressed down harder, forcing me to my knees. The tension in the room was suffocating, Roman's power saturating the air. I watched as Alexander doubled over, his pride shattered with each second Roman kept him pinned to the ground. Jason hovered outside, clearly hesitating to intervene. His pleading look met mine, but I ignored him. If Roman was this angry, it wasn't my place to stop him. Yet. "You think you can just waltz in here and lay hands on my mate?" Roman snarled, his voice low and deadly. Alexander growled weakly, struggling against the weight of Roman's dominance. "You'll regret this," he hissed, his voice filled with venom. "Both of you." Roman let out a sharp laugh, one that sent chills down even my spine. "You think I'm afraid of your empty threats?" When Alexander refused to back down, Roman pressed his foot harder into his back. Mason's anguished growl met my ears, yet Roman's expression remained unchanging, cold, unrelenting. "I'll give you one last chance," Roman said, his claws extending. "Do not come near her again, or you won't leave alive." Alexander's reply was nothing more than a pained snarl. That was my cue to interfere before things escalated further. "Brother," I said softly, stepping closer and placing my hand on his wrist. His claws stopped inches from Alexander's neck then. He turned to look at me, his expression unreadable. "You can't watch me kill him?" Roman asked, his voice quieter now. "We have more important matters to deal with," I reminded him, glancing at the writhing Alexander. Roman studied me for a moment, his gaze lingering on my face before he nodded. "You're lucky she stopped me," he muttered to Alexander before stepping away. I deliberately stepped on Alexander's injured hand as I turned toward the door. "Thank you for the free entertainment," I added, making sure my voice carried just enough venom. Roman followed me out, his overwhelming presence comforting, rather than suffocating. The pain in my ribs was nothing compared to the humiliation burning in my chest. Roman Thorne's dominance had left me kneeling, weak and useless. And Scarlet, her words were like daggers, cutting through what little pride I had left. Jason finally rushed over, his face pale as he helped me to my feet. "What now, Alpha?" he asked nervously. I clutched my ribs and spat on the ground, my vision blurry with anger. "We find out who Roman Thorne really is," I hissed. "And then we make him pay." Scarlet's POV. In the SUV, I quietly reached across the seat, interlocking my fingers with Roman's. The tension still bled from him, but his grip was strong and reassuring. "Is everything settled with the territory negotiations?" I asked softly, trying to redirect his lingering anger. He turned to me, his ice-blue eyes searching mine. "Why do you ask?" I leaned against his shoulder, letting his warmth envelop me. "I miss Mother and Natalie," I admitted, my voice almost a whisper. Roman's hand tightened around mine, and without a word, he pulled me closer. His silent promise was clear. He would take me home soon. Chapter 108, Claiming Marks. Roman pulled me onto his lap the second we settled into the living room. His arms circled around me possessively as though I might slip away. His hand reached up, smoothing over my hair as if he was trying to calm a restless wolf. "You're clever," he murmured, a smirk tugging at his lips. His ice-blue eyes softened just a fraction as they roamed my face. "Strategically brilliant, actually." I blinked, unsure what brought on the unexpected praise. "What are you talking about?" He leaned closer, and his deep voice dropped to an almost teasing whisper. "You little wolf, the way you've been outmaneuvering Sarah, Grace, Alexander, even Nathan. That's not strategy." My voice edged with embarrassment. "It's survival." "Maybe," he said, his hands sliding down to rest lightly on my waist. His eyes grew warmer, but it didn't lessen the weight of his gaze. "But I like it." There was something more behind his smile, something that stole the breath right out of my lungs. Before I could find words to respond, his other hand ghosted along the side of my neck. He wasn't being subtle about what he wanted me to notice. "You're hiding those," he said softly, his fingers brushing against my scarf. My cheeks flamed instantly. I grabbed his wrist instinctively, an overwhelming panic making my heartbeat skip out of rhythm. "Stop!" I blurted out, mortified. He tilted his head slightly, his smirk growing more pronounced. "Why? You weren't embarrassed last night." I wanted to die on the spot. My entire body seemed to heat in simultaneous mortification and anger. "Roman," I whisper-yelled, knowing there was no one around to hear it. He didn't let up, not that I expected him to. Pulling my chin up gently, he locked his gaze onto mine. His ice-blue eyes were intense, unreadable, and impossibly close. "You're cute when you're flustered," he murmured, his smile softening into something gentler but no less mischievous. My head spun with the weight of his words and the closeness of his presence. How had I let this happen? How had I let myself fall into this tangled web with my brother, this wolf I'd spent so many years running away from? Before reality could completely pull me under, I did the only thing I could think of. I buried my face into his shoulder. "I think I have a fever," I mumbled against the fabric of his shirt. Roman's chuckle rumbled through his chest, vibrating against me. "A fever, huh?" "Yes, Roman," I said quickly, before he could press me further. "I'm sure of it." His hand came up to touch my forehead. His skin felt cooler than mine, as always. "Strange," he said, his tone dipping into mock concern. "Maybe I should examine you more thoroughly." I jerked back, horrified. "I'm fine, really." His laugh grew louder, and I glared at him, trying to suppress the way my heart thudded erratically. "Roman, can we not talk about this?" He let out a hum as if considering it. "Okay, he finally said, much to my relief, but before I could breathe easy, his eyes twinkled mischievously. But only because we have a meeting to attend soon. Otherwise, I might have given you my full attention, little wolf. I busied myself adjusting the scarf around my neck, hoping the action would calm me down. Are you done teasing me now? For now, he answered easily, standing and taking me by the hand. Hurry up, I don't like being late, and neither should you, especially when it's territory matters. As we walked toward the door, Roman's eyes trailed back to my movements. The moment he saw my scarf and my attempt to adjust it higher, he stopped in his tracks. You're still hiding those from me, he said casually, though his tone carried a hint of something deeper. I froze, my fingers gripping the soft fabric tightly. Of course I'm hiding it. And why is that? His question was direct, but his body language remained as calm as ever, his eyes pinning me in place. Because, I answered, my voice small. Then, without thinking, I blurted out the thought that had been tormenting me for months. Have you done this before? In the years I was gone? Did you give those marks to anyone else? Silence fell over the room. Roman's expression didn't change immediately, but I swore the temperature dropped. He stepped forward, slow and calculated, and his hands found my shoulders. Bolder than usual, aren't you, Scarlet? He said, his voice low and carrying something entirely predatory. I faltered, my confidence slipping like sand through my fingers. You've been gone for years, and that's the question you dare to ask me now? His fingers tightened their grip slightly, and his eyes bore into mine, impossibly intense. Answer me, I stammered, trying to meet his gaze but failing miserably. He pulled me closer, his breath warm against my ear. There's only you, Scarlet, he said. There's only ever been you. Those words might as well have been shackles, because as terrifying as his possessiveness was, part of me didn't want to escape them. The call with my mother had an air of inevitability. Catherine rarely intervened unless there was something she couldn't ignore. How's Scarlet, Roman? She asked, her tone calm yet probing as always. Safe. Good, she replied, though her voice carried an underlying meaning I couldn't quite place. When are you bringing her back to the east? Not yet, I said firmly. It's not the time. Her sigh was subtle but audible. She needs her pack, Roman. She needs you to protect her there, not here. I am protecting her, I answered sharply. Catherine's tone softened slightly. Roman, I've already handled things on my end, ensuring the Thorn Pack won't punish Scarlet for her absence. But you can't delay forever. It's under control, I assured her. And speaking of control, keep Natalie out of this. She won't help. There was a pause, and I could tell she didn't fully agree. But Catherine knew better than to argue when my mind was made up. Just make sure, Roman. Her voice turned grave. Don't let things repeat. Once is enough. And with that, the line went dead. I sighed heavily. My phone pressed against my ear as Emma's familiar voice filled the line, updating me on the healing center operations. Anything new since I messaged you the severance papers? I asked, my fingers idly tracing patterns on the desk. Emma's voice grew chipper again. You finally got Sarah's signature. That's something to celebrate. It's nothing. Just a piece of paper, I muttered, though relief spread in my chest, knowing it was official. Do you want me to publicize it? She asked, her tone light yet full of curiosity. Yes, I confirmed quickly. Make it loud and clear. I want every wolf around to know. There's no bond left between us and the Winters. Done, Emma said with a confident tone. But Scarlet, why the rush? You're free from them now. What's pushing you to finalize it this fast? For a moment I hesitated, gripping the edge of the desk. My voice softened, but my words were firm. Because the Winter Pack isn't done with me, Emma. They tried to use me before. If they find out about Roman, about what he really is, they'll exploit it. I can't risk that. Not to him, not to us. There was a brief silence on the line as Emma absorbed my words. You're scared they'll use Roman to gain power through the Shadow Organization? I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Exactly. They've done it with others before. I won't give them the chance to try it with him. Emma exhaled sharply, her voice laced with understanding. Okay. Consider it done, Scarlet. No one will question your break from the Winters once this goes live. Keep your guard up, okay? Thanks, Emma, I replied, my voice softening as relief seeped in. I owe you. You can repay me with dinner tomorrow, she teased, her tone lightening. Don't flake on me this time for your possessive alpha. Deal, I said with a small laugh before ending the call. Placing my phone on the desk, I moved toward the large window overlooking the beach. The waves crashing against the shore usually brought me peace, but tonight they only stirred my unease. I wrapped the scarf tighter around my neck as the image of Roman's claiming marks flickered in my mind. What was he planning next? What would he do if they tried to challenge him? I hated not knowing what steps he'd take. Lost in my thoughts, I didn't hear him approach until I turned around and collided directly into his chest. "Careful, little wolf," Roman said, his tone warm with amusement as his hands steadied my shoulders. "Are you trying to knock me over?" I flushed, stepping back abruptly. "I didn't hear you come in." His ice blue eyes glinted mischievously as he leaned forward slightly, brushing a stray strand of hair from my face. His fingers lingered for just a moment too long, grazing my forehead gently. "Too lost in your thoughts to notice me? That's rare." I tilted my chin up, trying to salvage some pride. "I have a lot on my mind." His smirk widened, though his gaze turned thoughtful. "I noticed. You were on the phone with Emma." I froze, narrowing my eyes at him. "You were eavesdropping?" "I overheard it," he corrected smoothly, his hands now slipping into his pockets. "And I'm glad. Seems we're on the same page about the winter pack schemes. Chapter 1 and 9, Pack Alliances and Intimate Moments." The restaurant was an odd mix of extravagance and subtlety. Eric Blackwood sat across from me, reclining in his chair like he owned the place, his usual smirk a mask of infuriating composure. I found myself gripping my glass of water tighter than necessary to keep my nerves in check. The weight of Hunter's earlier call still hung heavy in the air. For once, it seemed my pack had caught a break. Roman had agreed to the alliance meeting tomorrow. Despite everything, I felt the spark of hope growing. I wasn't about to let Eric see it, though. "Roman agreed," I said finally, leaning slightly forward. My words were careful, but I couldn't entirely mask my excitement. "Tomorrow, he's willing to hear the Blake Pack's proposal." Eric raised a brow, his fingers brushing lazily over the rim of his wine glass. "Intriguing," he murmured. Then, with that aggravating air of nonchalance, he added, "And here I thought you were as good as dust in his eyes after that little mishap." My shoulders stiffened. Of course, Eric couldn't resist bringing up the Moonstone amulet incident. I forced myself to remain composed. If I snapped, it would only feed his amusement. "I've managed to smooth things over," I replied evenly, though my jaw tightened from the effort it took. "What matters is that Roman will hear us out. That's more than most can say." Eric tilted his head, his piercing gaze locking onto mine. For a moment, I thought he might push the subject further, but to my surprise, his smirk widened instead. "Well then, congratulations," he said smoothly, lifting his glass as if in toast. "Stepping into the wolf's den isn't for the faint of heart. I'm curious to see how you navigate it." His tone sent another wave of irritation through me, but I ignored it. "It's a critical opportunity for my pack. I won't waste it." Eric's sharp features softened into something resembling genuine curiosity. "Are you sure about that? You're juggling quite the mess already, for example." He leaned in slightly, the glint in his eye unmistakable. "Sophie?" My grip on the glass tightened until I thought it might shatter. Of course, he'd go there. "Sophie is confined," I said, choosing my words with care. "She won't cause any more problems." Eric chuckled, his rich laughter drawing a few curious glances from nearby tables. "I'll believe it when I see it, Nathan. Sophie isn't exactly known for her self-restraint." He took another sip of his wine, his smirk growing more pronounced as he added, "And let's not forget her wonderful performance at the Territory Council." I gave him a withering look, but he ignored it, his amusement unabated. "If you don't keep her in check, tomorrow's meeting could go up in flames before it even starts." This time, I couldn't hide the frustration seeping into my voice. "I'll manage it." Eric tipped his glass, taking his sweet time before leaning back in his chair. "I'm sure you will," he said, though his tone made it clear he thought otherwise. Before I could respond, he shifted gears, his sharp eyes narrowing slightly. "Now, tell me about Alexander. Still making a fool of himself over that mansion?" I exhaled sharply, barely holding back a laugh. "You could call it that," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from creeping into my tone. "He's so focused on Grace's recovery that he can't see the bigger picture." Eric raised a brow, intrigued. Do elaborate. I leaned forward, matching his intensity. The beachfront mansion he's pouring all his energy into acquiring? I paused for effect, watching his expression closely. It belongs to Roman and Scarlett. His reaction was immediate and satisfying. Eric's eyes widened ever so slightly, and his ever-present smirk faltered for the briefest of moments. Then, as if to cover his shock, he let out a low whistle, leaning back once more. Well, well, he drawled. And here I thought Alexander's bad luck couldn't possibly get worse. That changes everything. It does, I agreed, my lips curling into a grim smile. He has no idea he's being toyed with. Roman and Scarlett are letting him dig his own grave. Eric chuckled again, though this time there was genuine admiration in it. They're clever, I'll give them that. Alexander's outmatched, and he doesn't even realize it. The amber pack is already stretched thin because of his mistakes, I added. This will only make things worse. Eric studied me for a moment, his earlier amusement returning. You almost sound like you enjoy watching him struggle, Nathan. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I finished my drink in one swift motion before meeting his gaze. Alexander's suffering isn't my problem, I said finally. I'm focused on my pack. If Eric saw through my deflection, he didn't show it. Instead, he raised his glass one final time, his smile darkening. To tomorrow, then, he said. Let's see how well you play with the big dogs. The air by the lake was crisp and cool, carrying the faint earthy scent of morning dew. Scarlett sat beside me on the wooden bench, her legs swinging idly above the water's surface. Her fishing rod rested limply in her hands, forgotten as she gazed out at the still waters with a bored expression. This is such a waste of time, she muttered, her tone filled with exasperation. I suppressed a chuckle, keeping my eyes on the lake. Fishing teaches patience, little wolf. Try to enjoy the moment. She turned to glare at me, her emerald eyes narrowing. You didn't drag me out here to teach me life lessons. Admit it, you're just enjoying watching me suffer. This time, I let a small laugh escape. Maybe a little, I teased, earning a huff of annoyance from her. Before she could retort, the unmistakable sound of crunching gravel reached my ears. Turning slightly, I spotted Aiden Walsh and Hunter approaching, their silhouettes outlined by the rising sun. A lovely morning for a romantic lakeside date, Aiden called out, his loud, cheerful tone grating against the serene silence. Scarlett stiffened slightly beside me, her shoulders tensing as his gaze zeroed in on her. Aiden's sharp eyes sparkled with mirth as he came closer, his smirk widening. Well, well, he said, stopping a few feet away. What have we here? Scarlett glanced at him warily, her hand instinctively tugging at the edge of her scarf. What are you talking about, Aiden? She asked, her voice defensive. Aiden his head, his smile practically oozing mischief. The marks, dear Scarlett, he drawled, gesturing vaguely toward her neck. You're wearing them well. Her face turned bright red in an instant. That's none of your business, she snapped, her tone sharp enough to cut. I stepped in then, my voice low and steady. Enough, Walsh. The weight in my tone was enough to halt him, though his smile didn't waver. Oh, come now, Roman, I'm just... Enough, I repeated, my eyes narrowing in warning. Aiden held up his hands in mock surrender, feigning innocence. All right, don't get your fur in a twist. Hunter, sensing the growing tension, stepped beside Aiden, his expression neutral but firm. Aiden, he said quietly, some things are better left alone. Aiden blinked, glancing between me and Scarlett before realization finally dawned on his face. His grin faltered, his brows raising slightly. Oh, he said, the word hanging in the air like a revelation. Oh. Scarlett abruptly stood, her embarrassment clear as she avoided everyone's gaze. I'm going to explore the meadow, she announced, her voice tight. Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked away, her scarf fluttering slightly in the breeze. I watched her go for a moment, my gaze softening before turning back to Aiden. You really couldn't resist, could you? I said, my tone low and edged with warning. Aiden's grin returned, though it was weaker this time. What can I say? It's not every day you see Roman Thorne getting affectionate. I didn't dignify that with a response. Instead, I shifted my weight slightly, sending a swift kick to the edge of his boot. He stumbled but caught himself, laughing nervously. All right, message received, he said, brushing himself off. Before he could push further, my fishing line jerked, and I reeled in a large, gleaming fish. Without hesitation, I flung it at Aiden, who yelped as it narrowly missed his face. "Was that necessary?" he exclaimed, wiping water off his shirt. "Yes," I replied simply, my expression unreadable. Hunter sighed quietly, his disapproval evident but unspoken. Aiden crossed his arms, a faux pout on his face. "Seriously though, Roman, don't you think you're being a little intense? Scarlett's more than capable of handling herself." His words struck a nerve, and my gaze snapped to him, ice-blue eyes locking onto his with chilling intensity. "Do you think I don't know that?" I said, my voice quiet but laced with menace. Aiden hesitated, then tried again, his tone softer. "All I'm saying is, don't suffocate her, Roman. She's not the same girl she was before. She's stronger now." The mention of the past brought a flicker of memory, a reminder of everything Scarlett had endured, what I hadn't been able to stop. My jaw tightened, but I made no response. Sensing the tension, Aiden wisely chose to let the subject drop, mumbling something about checking the fishing gear. Chapter 110, Alpha's Fury and Pack Politics. Alexander's. The sharp throb from my broken arm wouldn't let me sleep. Each twitch sent a jolt of pain that reminded me of Roman's ruthless strength. His smug face, his cold, calculating ice-blue eyes, they haunted my every thought as I sat in the Amber Pack's healing den. I slammed my fist against the side of the bed, my other arm cradled in a cast. "Damn him," I growled through clenched teeth. "I want everything on him, his pack, his alliances, and especially Scarlett's connection to him. I want to know who he is." Jason stood next to the door, looking hesitant for the first time. "Alpha, I've exhausted every lead. Roman Thorne's records are deliberately kept out of sight. The Thorne Pack is elusive, and any hint of their movements vanishes before we get close." I glared at him, my anger bubbling like a storm ready to break. "Don't tell me you can't find anything. Keep digging." Jason nodded, but added cautiously, "Alpha, you do realize we're not just dealing with the Thorne Pack? The rumors about the Shadow Organization being tied to them, it's not something to take lightly. They're just rumors," I snapped, though my gut told me Jason might be right. "He humiliated me, Jason. He needs to answer for that. And Scarlett, she doesn't get to parade around with him like she's untouchable." Jason hesitated, but lowered his eyes, saying nothing more. Just then, a sharp knock echoed through the room. The healer opened the door cautiously, bowing as James Amber's beta strode in. "Your presence is required at the pack house," the beta announced firmly. His tone left no room for argument. I stiffened. Father rarely summoned me like this, especially when I'm injured. Unease settled over me. "What's this about?" I asked. The beta looked away, not meeting my gaze. "The Alpha King is waiting," he didn't elaborate. That was even worse. When I arrived at the pack house, the tension in the air was palpable. Pack members bowed quickly as I passed, their faces tight with apprehension. I could feel it. Father was furious. James Amber stood tall, his powerful frame casting a long shadow in the room. His usually calm, regal demeanor had been replaced by something predatory. The force of his alpha power filled the room, making even seasoned warriors flinch. "Father," I greeted cautiously, bowing slightly, "you summoned me." He turned sharply, his icy glare boring into me. The weight of his dominance hit me like a battering ram, making my legs feel weak. I struggled to keep my composure, but even as an alpha, standing against his full fury was no small feat. "Tell me, Alexander," he began, his deep voice barely controlled, "how is it that my son, my heir, has time to brawl with Roman Thorne, but no time to handle the Shadow Organization negotiations?" My stomach dropped. I started, but he cut me off with a snarl. "You were what, exactly? Wasting precious time on that poisoned she-wolf while our pack's future hangs by a thread? Or were you too busy being humiliated by a stronger alpha in public?" Every word felt like a blade. My fists clenched as I gritted my teeth, trying to keep my temper in check. "Father, I've been managing." "Managing?" He barked out a bitter laugh. "You're failing, Alexander. Your obsession with grace is clouding your judgment. Should I remind you what's at stake for the Amber Pack if we lose the Shadow Organization's support?" Something about his words felt calculated, as if there was more to this than he was letting on. "What's at stake?" I demanded, meeting his glare head-on despite the overwhelming pressure of his power. James took a step closer. His voice dropped to a lethal calm. The European territories. Eric Blackwood has offered their resources, but only if we secure their alliance through the Shadow Organization, an alliance that you've utterly neglected. Shock rippled through me. I wasn't informed of this. Why wasn't I? Because you're too wrapped up in your personal affairs? James thundered, and the dominance in his tone made me stumble back a step. You've made our pack look weak. Tell me, Alexander, what alpha would negotiate with a pack whose future leader prioritizes a dying mate over the survival of their people? His words cut deeper than any physical blow. My mind raced. Eric Blackwood, European resources, deals I hadn't even known about. Was I really blind to so much? James wasn't done. His lips curled into a sneer. You think you're protecting Grace, but if our pack loses strength because of your failures, she'll be the first to suffer. I froze, my anger giving way to an icy chill. What are you saying? I'm saying, James growled, his tone dripping with venom, if she becomes a liability, she'll no longer have the Amber Pack's protection. The threat was clear, and it was devastating. No, I shouted, desperation seeping into my voice. I'll fix it. I'll secure the alliance, whatever it takes. You'd better, he said coldly, or the next conversation we have won't be this forgiving. The tension in the Shadow Organization's private meeting room was palpable, but it wasn't anything unusual. Roman controlled the atmosphere like he controlled everything else, with absolute power. The room was filled with muted conversations and the clinking of glasses as business unfolded seamlessly. I stood to the side, watching quietly as Roman and Eric Blackwood discussed territory negotiations. Eric's sharp European accent carried across the room. The Amber Pack, the Northern Alpha King, they're becoming an embarrassment, no? Roman's lips curved subtly. They've always been inefficient. Now they're desperate. It's predictable. Hunter stepped forward, a file tucked under his arm. Alpha, Jason Reed, has been running around like a headless chicken, trying to uncover Scarlett's connection to us. Their desperation reeks of amateurism. I arched an eyebrow, glancing at Roman. Jason? I asked. Alexander's lapdog, Roman replied casually, not even sparing me a look, as he added, he's wasting his time. Eric smirked, clearly enjoying the Northern Pack's misfortune. Perhaps Nathan Blake is worthier than the Amber Pack for these negotiations, don't you agree? He's been persistent, even if his execution is sloppy. Roman made a vague gesture, as if weighing the idea. Possibly, he mused. He turned to Hunter. Arrange a meeting. Let's see if Nathan understands the stakes better than Alexander. Hunter bowed slightly and left the room. I remained still, my gaze fixed on Roman. His focus shifted back to Eric, but I noticed the faint crease in his brow. He was calculating, always calculating. That's when I caught him reaching for another glass of wine. Didn't you already have 2 glasses? I asked, stepping forward before I could stop myself. My voice was sharper than I intended, drawing immediate attention. Roman raised an eyebrow at me, bottle in hand as though challenging me to stop him. It's just wine, he said smoothly. Nothing to be concerned about, little wolf. Really? I countered, stepping closer. My fingers wrapped around the glass in his hand, pulling it away. Then why do I have to deal with your questionable behavior afterward? His ice-blue eyes gleamed with amusement, but there was something darker behind them. Are you telling me what to do now? I held my ground. I'm asking you to think. You want to make decisions tonight, don't you? Strategic ones? There was a flicker of surprise in his expression before he leaned back, smirking. Very well. Have it your way. He handed me the glass. Unconventional compliance in his tone. Without thinking, I raised the glass to my lips and took a sip. The wine was rich and smooth, but I barely noticed as I held his gaze. Roman chuckled softly, leaning closer. If you plan to drink it for me, you might as well make it worthwhile. Heat bloomed in my cheeks at his words and the intensity behind them. I set the glass down deliberately, ignoring the way he watched me. Chapter 111, Drunken Confessions. By the time the evening wound down, my little wolf was barely holding herself together. Scarlett, who was often as sharp and feisty as her emerald eyes suggested, was now slumped against me, her cheeks flushed from the effects of the moon-blessed wine. Brother, she slurred softly, wrapping her arms around my neck as if she owned me. Her voice was lighter than usual, tinged with an unusual vulnerability. Didn't you, promise me something fun? I held her closer, cradling her securely as we exited the venue. The biting winter wind tried to nip at her exposed face, but I shifted my coat around her, shielding her from the chill. Fun? I chuckled under my breath. Scarlet, I think you've had plenty of fun for tonight. She frowned, burying her warm face against my chest to escape the cold. Lise, she mumbled accusingly, her voice muffled by my shirt. You promised special treats. You always do this. I could barely hold back my laughter. Seeing Scarlet like this, unguarded and borderline childish, was a rare sight, one I couldn't help but find endearing. I think you might be confusing reality with your own imagination, I teased. She weakly thumped her fist against my chest in protest and looked up at me, her green eyes hazy but still full of life. Mean. You're so mean to me, Roman, she whined, her words dragging slightly. With another amused chuckle, I adjusted my hold on her and began walking towards the car. If you're so sure I'm mean, why don't I just leave you out here in the cold? Don't even joke about that, she replied instantly, her frantic tone catching me off guard. Her hands gripped the lapels of my coat as if even the idea of being away from me was too much to bear. Relax, I murmured, giving her a reassuring squeeze. You know I'd never leave you, not for anything. A small smile tugged at her lips as she relaxed back into my hold, the tension in her tiny frame easing. Okay, but don't make promises you can't keep next time, she mumbled, letting out a small hic. I sighed, shaking my head as I carried her towards the gleaming black SUV waiting in the parking lot. Each step felt lighter, despite Scarlet's added weight in my arms, a strange and unexplainable comfort swelling in my chest. Hunter leaned against the SUV, his keen eyes instantly zoning in on Scarlet's disheveled state. His smirk was already in place before I even reached him. I could practically feel the comments bubbling inside him, ready to spill. Well, what do we have here? Hunter's voice carried that usual edge of amusement. Is this Scarlet the untouchable Winters? Looking like this? He exaggerated the words, his grin growing wider. Don't start, I warned firmly, the sharpness of my tone causing him to raise his hands in mock surrender. Despite his amusement, he opened the car door for us, stepping aside with theatrical politeness. Carefully, I slid into the seat with Scarlet still securely cradled against me. She was quiet now, content to nestle into my chest with soft, muffled breaths. Hunter took the driver's seat, and as soon as the doors were shut, he let out an exaggerated sigh. You can't tell me not to start, he said with mock indignation. This is a once-in-a-lifetime sight. Does she even know what she's doing right now? She doesn't, I replied coolly, brushing a stray strand of her auburn hair away from her face, and you do well to keep it that way. He smirked again, shaking his head. Had I known 2 glasses could do this to her, I'd have shown up an hour earlier to see it for myself. Careful, Hunter, I said in a low tone. You're very close to crossing a line. His humor didn't fade, but he wisely shifted his focus. Fine, I'll play good, but it looks like you've got other wolves to deal with. The Amber Pack, for starters. I didn't respond immediately, instead letting my hand rest idly on Scarlet's back. The gentle rise and fall of her breaths against my chest helped calm the irritation brewing inside me. Still grasping at straws, are they? I asked finally, my voice level yet full of quiet menace. More than you know, Hunter said, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror. They're flailing? Finally realizing someone's outsmarted them. Still can't figure out who owns the seaside mansion, though. I smirked to myself, the corners of my lips curling just slightly. Good. Let them feel the frustration. They deserve it. Hunter nodded in agreement. It's amusing, really, watching them scramble while pretending they're in control. And James Amber? I asked, my tone shifting slightly. Still silent, no direct contact yet, but you know he'll call eventually, probably when he's out of options. Predictable, I muttered under my breath, my gaze drifting out the window as streetlights blurred past. There was a strange satisfaction in knowing how far the Amber Pack had fallen, chasing shadows they couldn't even name. Gently, Scarlet stirred against me, her soft voice breaking through the momentary silence. Roman, she mumbled sleepily. You're really warm. I felt my chest tighten at her words, her vulnerability chipping away at every wall I'd built. Get some rest, little wolf, I murmured, pressing a light kiss to the top of her head. She mumbled something incoherent in response before snuggling closer, and for once, The world felt quiet. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel, the tension in my grip causing the leather to groan in protest. The words from Sarah's call still rang in my ears, sharp and relentless. "Why are there amber guards outside Grace's chamber? She's already weak. You need to fix this, Alexander." The anger in her voice hadn't been unfamiliar, but the desperation beneath it, that had stung. I knew she wasn't wrong. Grace was hanging on by a thread, her condition worsening every day. And yet, no matter how much I tried to do for her, it was never enough. I sighed heavily, my mind a jumbled mess of thoughts. Sarah's plea echoed again, so insistent. Move her to the seaside mansion. The mention of the mansion twisted my stomach into knots. The truth was, the mansion wasn't secured. It wasn't even close. Every negotiation attempt I'd made, every effort to acquire it, had been a humiliating failure. "You promised, Alexander," Sarah's sharp voice reminded me during the call. She believed I had already sealed the deal, that Grace would soon have exactly what she needed. But I hadn't, and the fact that Scarlett's name kept surfacing in whispers surrounding its ownership only fueled my growing rage. The idea of her standing in my way, meddling wherever she pleased, it was infuriating. Lost in thought, I nearly missed Jason's voice cutting through my frustration. He'd been talking, though I hadn't been listening. "Negotiations tomorrow are critical," Jason emphasized sharply, his tone betraying his stress. "Nathan Blake's deal hinges on this. If he finalizes it, we'll lose access to the Moonstone deposits entirely. We can't afford that." "Forget it," I snapped, my tone harsher than intended. "Take me to the mansion." Jason stared at me in disbelief, glancing away from the road momentarily. "Alpha, with all due respect, the deposits are—" I said, "Take me to the mansion," I growled, cutting him off. "Everything else can wait." Jason's hesitation was obvious, his grip on the steering wheel tightening, but he remained silent, doing as I ordered. The car moved steadily through the darkened streets. Just as my focus started wavering again, another call lit up my phone. Grace's name flashed on the screen, and the weight in my chest only deepened. "Alexander?" Her voice trembled, sounding frail and broken. It hit me harder than I cared to admit. "I'm here," I said, trying to soften my tone for her sake. Why won't they leave me alone? I can't do this. Please, Alexander, get me out of here." Her words came out unevenly, a mix of sobs and gasps. "Grace," I began before faltering. Her desperation made it impossible to think clearly. "I'll come for you. Tomorrow morning I'll take you out of there," I promised, knowing it might cause more problems later. She sniffled softly, relief apparent in her breathing. "Thank you," she whispered before the line went dead. As the car approached the gates, I leaned forward, scanning the entrance. Security guards stood stationed outside, their presence immediately sparking annoyance. Jason looked my way, waiting for my order. "Make sure they let us through," I instructed, my voice cold. Jason nodded, already rolling down his window. But before he could speak to the guards, movement caught my eye. A sleek black SUV pulled up alongside us. The gates opened effortlessly for it, allowing the car to slip inside without issue. My heart dropped the second I recognized it. Scarlett. My hands clenched into fists. That mansion, it had to be hers. Or his, Chapter 112, Dangerous Claims. The black SUV disappeared down the winding road, its tinted windows concealing its occupants. Alexander stood by the security gates, his fists clenched so tightly his nails bit into his palms. He didn't need to see who was inside. He already knew. "Roman," he hissed under his breath, the name thick with venom. Jason stood beside him, his face a mask of grim confirmation. "This explains a lot, Alpha. The guards—" He gestured toward the heavily armed sentries flanking the entrance. They didn't even hesitate to lower their defenses for the vehicle. Alexander's jaw ticked. "Absolute deference," he muttered. "No hesitation, no questions." Jason nodded solemnly. "Whoever was in that car holds power over them. It has to be Roman. Scarlett wouldn't have this level of influence alone." Alexander's hands trembled, and not from fear. Fury bubbled up, barely contained. The pieces finally clicked into place. Scarlett's so-called mysterious protector wasn't just some nameless alpha. It was him, the man who had flaunted his dominance, broken his bones, and humiliated him repeatedly. "She's been staying here," he barked, pacing in frustration. "All this time, under his protection, living in this mansion while we scramble to even buy it for Grace." He kicked at the gravel below. Jason remained silent, watching his alpha seethe. He knew better than to interrupt Alexander when he was this volatile. Alexander reached for his phone and dialed Scarlett. His finger pounded the screen with more force than necessary. The line rang once, twice, thrice. Voicemail. "Damn it," he roared, throwing the phone into the passenger seat of his car. He turned to Jason, his eyes blazing. "She's avoiding me." Jason hesitated. "What's the plan, Alpha? Do we confront them? Or—" "No," Alexander snapped, cutting him off. "We wait. Let the Winter Pack deal with their drama first. Scarlett may think she's won this round, but this isn't over." The Northern Territories buzzed with scandal. News of Scarlett's legal severance from the Winter Pack spread like wildfire, igniting waves of gossip through the packs. "Can you believe it?" a young she-wolf whispered to her companion near the Territory's trading square. "Sarah Winter signed the bond severance herself." The other wolf hummed in agreement, her eyes wide. "I heard she didn't even hesitate. One signature and Scarlett was no longer her daughter." The first wolf leaned closer, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "But she's still keeping Grace, right? The adopted one. Can you imagine favoring a fake over your own blood? Terrible." The second wolf smirked. "Oh, they're getting what they deserve. This whole mess makes the Winter Pack look heartless. Not that Scarlett seems to care. She's doing just fine with her new arrangements." They snickered, their conversation blending into the larger hum of speculation and judgment echoing through the marketplace. In the Winter Pack's main house, Sarah was fending off a barrage of accusatory calls. She sat in the grand office, her knuckles white around the armrest of her chair. Her composure cracked with each grating conversation. "Alpha Marcus, I told you," she snapped into the phone. "I did what was necessary for the pack. Scarlett didn't want anything to do with us anyway." The voice on the other end of the line, muffled but clearly unimpressed, said something that made Sarah bristle. "Grace is still my priority. This has nothing to do with favoritism." Another voice joined the fray from a separate call waiting on her second phone. She sighed, exhaustion and frustration laced with panic. The judgment, the pitying words disguised as condolences, it pushed her to the brink. "Enough of this," she growled, her trembling fingers dialing Scarlett's number. My phone buzzed incessantly, the sharp vibration like an annoying mosquito I couldn't swat away. With a groan, I reached for it, already regretting not turning it off entirely. The caller ID flashed Sarah Winter, and my lip curled in disgust. I considered ignoring it for the 15th time that day, but finally answered with a sigh. "What do you want, Sarah?" I drawled lazily, still recovering from the glass of moon-blessed wine Roman had warned me about. Her voice came through sharp, cutting, and loaded with accusation. "How dare you manipulate this situation to make us look heartless?" I couldn't help it. A laugh bubbled out of me, cold and mocking. "Manipulate? Oh, Sarah, you give me way too much credit. Don't play coy with me, Scarlett," she spat. "You deliberately released those documents to smear our name." "Correction," I interrupted, sitting up straighter. "I publicized the truth. You, on the other hand, signed your own betrayal." Her fury crackled through the line. "You made it appear as though we abandoned you." "Didn't you?" I countered, my voice icy now. "I seem to recall living off scraps while you lavished Grace with every ounce of your so-called love. Should I go on, or have you already forgotten the details of my charming childhood?" There was silence on her end, but I wouldn't let her rally. "Not this time. Exploiting me?" I continued, venom lacing every word. "Darling mother, I thrived despite your neglect, and let's not even start with my healing center. All those profits you never touched, remember?" That struck a nerve. "You think I care about your pathetic business?" Sarah snarled. A wicked smile curled my lips. "Perhaps not, but you'll care when Grace requires my resources. Remember that, mother. Remember it well." I ended the call before she could respond, tossing the phone onto the bed with a satisfied sigh. Roman appeared seconds later, holding a steaming mug of some strange-smelling tea. His gaze found mine immediately, narrowing slightly. "Trouble?" he asked, setting the tea on the side table and folding his arms. I shrugged. "What else is new?" He raised a brow, clearly unconvinced. Before I could deflect, his fingers brushed against my forehead, testing for signs of illness. "Stop that," I protested weakly, swatting at his hand. "Stop what?" he retorted, smirking. Caring? Ignoring his teasing tone, I pulled the sheets tighter around me. His eyes flickered down, noticing the thin fabric of my sleeping clothes. With an exaggerated sigh, he pulled me into his lap and secured the blankets tightly around me. "Roman?" I gasped indignantly, squirming against him. "What do you think you're—" "Relax," he murmured. "They're practically see-through. I'm sparing you the chilly air." My face heated instantly, and I opened my mouth to argue, but he cut me off by thrusting the tea under my nose. "Drink," he commanded softly, his tone brooking no argument. I frowned, glaring at the bitter brew with disdain. "It smells awful," I complained. "I'll drink it, later." His ice-blue eyes sparkled with amusement, though his voice was firm. "You'll drink it now, little wolf, or shall I help you?" My blush deepened. "It needs to cool," I shot back, my voice wavering. Roman chuckled, tapping the rim of the mug against my lips. "Drink," he repeated, this time with slightly less patience. Grumbling under my breath, I took a reluctant sip, my nose wrinkling at the bitterness. Roman watched me the entire time, unamused by my obvious reluctance. And yet, a small smile tugged at his lips as he pulled the mug away. "Good girl," he said quietly, his fingers brushing along my temple. Flustered, I refused to meet his gaze, nesting deeper into the warmth of the blankets, and his arms despite my internal protests. Roman's uncanny ability to unsettle me was unparalleled, but for now, I let it slide. For now, Chapter 113, Deadly Realizations. I sat in Jason's car, my eyes glued to the black SUV as its taillights disappeared through the gates of the seaside mansion. Fury burned through my veins like molten silver. That car, that maddeningly sleek, familiar car. "Jason," I growled, my voice low and icy, "how long has that mansion been occupied?" Jason hesitated for a moment as though considering his words carefully. "Alpha, it's only been in active use for the past month," he finally answered, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. Records show renovations started right before the marking ceremony postponement, with Scarlet. The mention of Scarlet's name was enough to make my jaw tighten, fists clenching against the armrest. My chest heaved with predatory rage. A moment of clarity struck me, the timing wasn't coincidental. "So you're telling me," I began, struggling to maintain an even tone, "this started because of her?" Jason's silence spoke volumes, but his slight nod confirmed my suspicion. "She's doing this on purpose," I muttered, my thoughts racing. "She's deliberately tormenting me, using this mansion to rake salt into my wounds. And Grace's." Jason's brow furrowed deeply. "Do you think she's doing this to provoke Grace, or is it about you?" "I don't care what it's about," I snapped, slamming my fist against the side compartment. The dull thud wasn't nearly satisfying enough to quell the anger inside me. Whatever her reason, she's gone too far. Jason glanced toward me, his hesitation clear. "Alpha, maybe you should just ask her directly about the mansion." "No," I cut him off, venom in my tone. "That's exactly what she wants. For us to crawl to her for answers, for Grace to be humiliated again." My breaths came out in shallow huffs as Jason gripped the wheel tighter, clearly uncomfortable. But the anger wasn't just directed at Scarlet, it was also at myself, my weakness. My inability to do anything substantial. I promised Grace a haven, a chance to heal, and now my own incompetence was glaring at me like a mockery. I needed the mansion, but worse, I hated that she held all the power. The car's tense silence was shattered by the sudden, shrill ring of my phone. Glancing at the screen, I cursed under my breath. "Father!" "Alpha King," I muttered, answering without much choice. "Alexander," came my father's commanding tone, sharp enough to cut through steel. "Where are you?" "I'm handling the seaside mansion," I replied, forcing as much control into my voice as I could muster. There was a pause. Then his voice returned, colder and harder. "Handling? You're still chasing after that property even after I explicitly warned you?" "Damn it, Father!" I ground out, my temper flaring. "This isn't just about property. Grace needs somewhere safe to recover." "Enough!" His sharp tone silenced me immediately, sending a jolt down my spine. "I don't care about your excuses. You are behaving like a lovesick fool while our pack faces greater threats. You've delayed the Amber Pack's progression enough." "I'm managing everything else," I bit out through clenched teeth, though the lie tasted bitter even as I said it. "Territory negotiations, Alexander," James interrupted coldly. "That's what matters, not your obsession with Grace's doomed recovery. Your negligence ends now. Get back to the pack house, immediately." The call ended on his command, leaving me staring furiously at the blank screen. My father's abrupt dismissal only fueled the storm brewing inside me. My grip on the phone tightened. "Jason," I muttered, my voice dangerous and low, "start driving. We have no choice but to handle this. Another way." Scarlett's POV. My phone buzzed relentlessly beside me, the screen lighting up with missed calls from unknown numbers. I didn't need to guess who it was. The persistence, the irritation, it screamed Alexander. Instead of annoyance, amusement flickered through me. Finally, I grabbed the phone and swiped to answer one call, allowing myself the small pleasure of hearing his frustration firsthand. "Finally!" Alexander's voice snarled through the receiver. "Do you think ignoring my calls will stop me?" "I swear, Scarlett, stop playing whatever twisted game this is." "Hello to you too, former fiancé," I drawled, letting my voice drip with mocking sweetness. "Have you been struggling without me? I'd offer my condolences, but I don't feel much sympathy." There was an audible inhale on the other end, an attempt, no doubt, to keep his anger from exploding. That alone made me bite back a smirk. "You think this is funny?" he demanded, his tone akin to a low growl. "Funny isn't the word I'd use," I replied airily. "Though I must admit, watching you flail around trying to acquire that mansion is quite entertaining." "Scarlett," he snapped, his aggravation boiling over. "Enough with the games. If you know something about—" "I know everything," I cut in smoothly, leaning back in my chair, "including how you've been running around like an untrained pup trying to beg and plead your way into sealing a deal. Let me guess. Daddy had to pull your leash?" His silence was immediate. It was gratifying. "How does that even feel?" I continued, ignoring the satisfying tinge of helpless rage I could sense brewing on the other end. "Being alpha in name but a puppet at heart. You can't even sign off on something as basic as Grace's treatment without James Amber's approval. Pathetic, really." Alexander's voice shook with barely contained rage as he finally bit back. "You really think you're above me now, Scarlett? Just because you've got some mysterious backer. Above you? Oh, Alexander, don't kid yourself." My laughter cut him off sharply. I always was. There was a sharpness to his breathing that made my triumph all the more poignant. For a moment, I thought he might actually snap. "You," he hissed, his tone dangerously low, "must really love watching people suffer." "Not people," I corrected, my voice icy. "Just you." His anger hit a peak, but before he could respond further, I delivered my finishing blow. "Admit it, Alexander. You can't. You can't pay the mansion's price. You can't win against me. Say it." The silence on the line carried the weight of his hatred, but slowly it came. The words I wanted to hear. "I can't," he admitted through gritted teeth, each word spoken like it physically pained him. Smiling, I tilted my head. "What was that?" I teased, feigning innocence. "I didn't quite catch that." "Scarlett," he bellowed, but I had already ended the call. Setting the phone down, I couldn't stop the grin pulling at my lips. When I glanced up, the door to my room opened, and Roman entered, a tray of neatly peeled oranges in hand. He raised an eyebrow at my expression. "Good mood?" he asked, setting the tray on the bedside table. "Alexander," I explained simply, picking up an orange slice. "He's desperate, determined to buy the mansion I already own. It's amusing, really, like watching a wolf chase his own tail." Roman's lips curved into a small smirk. "As expected, he's out of his league." Shrugging, I bit into the orange piece. The sharp, sour taste immediately made me grimace, and I spat it out instinctively. Roman, ever attentive, reached out without hesitation, catching the bitten orange bit before it hit the floor. His deep chuckle filled the room. "Sour?" he asked casually. I nodded, embarrassed. "It's terrible," I admitted, trying to sit up further. Before I could swing my legs over the bed, Roman's hand gently but firmly pressed against my shoulder, pushing me back down. "Don't move," he instructed. Then, with a glint of mischief in his ice-blue eyes, he leaned closer. "Let me taste how sour it is." Without warning, his lips covered mine, the kiss deep and unhurried. The tang of the orange lingered between us, but all I could focus on was the warmth of his touch. My cheeks burned with a mixture of shock and flustered embarrassment. When he pulled back, his expression was utterly sinful. "Not bad," he remarked, though his tone betrayed his true thoughts. His smirk deepened. "Anything else you'd like me to taste?" Flustered, I shoved weakly at his chest. Roman, I hissed, but his laughter followed me, filling the space. Chapter 114, Political Tensions, Scarlett's POV. Dinner had been uneventful. The food was good, but the silence Roman imposed as he watched me eat made me focus more on finishing my plate than enjoying it. Now, sprawled on the sofa, I thumbed through my phone, chatting with Emma. She was rapid-fire texting about the latest gossip, most of it involving Grace and the ridiculous mess unfolding in the winter pack. Emma, did you hear Sarah's outburst at the meeting earlier? Apparently, she broke a chair when someone mentioned the severance papers. I smirked, tapping out a quick reply. Chair destruction? Sounds therapeutic for her. Maybe she needed it. Emma, therapy or not, I'm sure it was embarrassing. Imagine Sarah admitting they need your help to save Grace. The irony is killing me. Chapter 115, Suspicions and Schemes, Alexander's POV. Jason's words echoed in my head, hitting a nerve I didn't want to admit I had. She might have a destined mate bond with him, Jason had muttered cautiously after the black SUV disappeared. I turned my glare on him, my hand tightening into a fist. Each movement reminded me of my broken arm, but the flare of pain only fueled my irritation. You expect me to believe that Scarlett is bonded to someone like him? My voice was razor sharp. I refused to entertain the thought, yet the idea planted its roots in my mind. Jason didn't flinch despite my tone. It would explain a lot, Alpha. The influence, the resources, that security. Not many alphas, even strong ones, can command that kind of power. I scoffed, narrowing my eyes. Scarlett is a healer. A glorified one, maybe, but still a healer. How could someone as powerful as him even look her way? She's ordinary in every other way. Jason hesitated, but the slightly raised brow on his usually stoic face told me what he wasn't saying aloud. Out with it? I demanded. He rubbed his jaw, choosing his words cautiously. She's not exactly ordinary, Alpha. Her healing center is one of the most renowned in the Northern Territories. Even packs outside the region are aware of her abilities. That isn't something to overlook. I ground my teeth but said nothing. Scarlett had always been clever, I'd give her that. Her healing center had been her greatest achievement, but I couldn't overlook how she walked away from the Winters, practically stripped of her pack ties, and yet somehow gained immense power through him. Find out more, I said sharply, cutting through Jason's observations. I want to know everything about their connection. How long has she been under his protection? How did she even catch his attention? And what does he see in her? Understood, Alpha, Jason replied with a nod before stepping into the driver's seat. The drive back to the Amber Pack house was heavy with tension, my mind swirling with images of Scarlett in that mansion, with Roman looming close. Each second heightened my resentment. As soon as we arrived back at the pack house, I felt it. A suffocating wave of dominance, sharp and heavy, crashing down like a thunderclap. My father's alpha power pressed into the air, suffusing the grand entrance. I barely held back a grimace as the weight worsened the throb in my arm. Victoria stood at the bottom of the staircase, her pristine presence undeniable. Her sharp gaze settled on me, scanning my pale, tired face and the careful way I held my injured arm. Her lips pressed into a thin line as her eyes flicked toward James, her unspoken disapproval simmering under her stoic facade. Alexander, James's booming voice greeted me, not in kindness but with a demand, as if my mere existence required an explanation. Father, I answered, bowing my head slightly to acknowledge his authority. His piercing blue eyes pinned me where I stood, narrowing with an edge that brooked no argument. Explain yourself, he barked. The force of his command made my legs waver slightly. I straightened despite the effort it took to hold my ground. We're set to meet with the Shadow Organization's representatives regarding the territory agreements tomorrow, I began, my voice steady but strained. His gaze didn't waver. I could feel the judgment radiating from him. And yet, he said slowly, his words precise and cold, the representative, Hunter Stone, finds it necessary to warn me to leash my own pup. Care to explain that? Shock rippled through me. Warn you? I've never even met. James raised a hand, silencing me instantly. Enough of your excuses. His voice rang against the walls, heavy with alpha authority. Warned, Hunter made it very clear that your actions have already offended their leader, Roman Thorn. Roman Thorn. The name dug into my chest. I gritted my teeth, barely able to suppress the rising heat in my veins. How could I have offended someone I've never met? I demanded, frustration spilling over. James's gaze darkened, his power rising around me. My knees buckled slightly under the invisible weight. That is what I intend to find out, James growled. But your incompetence has left this pack vulnerable. Do you understand the cost of your reckless behavior? Do you? Roman Thorn holds keys to alliances we cannot afford to lose. Victoria stepped closer this time, her emerald eyes softening slightly as they darted toward me. Perhaps the misunderstanding stems from recent events, she offered, her voice calm but firm. The timing of their interest in our territory coincides with Grace's condition worsening. My head whipped toward her, eyes narrowing. This has nothing to do with Grace, I argued quickly, though even as I said it, doubts started brewing in the back of my mind. James silenced me with another growl, the force of his alpha power making my unbroken arm ache. Quiet, he snapped. Until we understand how deep this issue runs, you will do as I say. His voice left no room for argument. Victoria stepped closer, a soothing calm trying to mediate. If their leader holds our future in his hands, we must tread carefully. That includes reconsidering our priorities with Grace. Her words sent icy dread straight through my chest. You can't mean, I started. We've relied on Grace for too long, James cut in, his voice colder than I thought possible. He turned to his beta. Inform Hunter that I will personally see to Grace's removal from this pack if it means saving our future. No, I barked instinctively. You can't do this. James's piercing gaze cut through my protests. I'll do whatever is necessary, he said with finality. Rage and helplessness burned hot under my skin as the weight in the room crushed me. The conversation blurred as Victoria gently guided me toward the door, her presence both a comfort and a weight in itself. Roman's POV. The evening air was cool, but charged with something unspoken, an anticipation I couldn't ignore. Hunter stood before me in the seaside mansion's study, his expression carefully composed. James Amber's beta called, he began, his voice as even as ever. He offered to send Grace away. Apparently, they believe it'll resolve matters with us. My lips curved into a slow, deliberate smile. Desperation, I murmured, savoring the thought. How predictable. Hunter shifted slightly, his sharp eyes awaiting further instructions. But before I could respond, the faintest presence brushed against my awareness. Scarlet. A thrill shot through me as I turned just in time to see her appear at the top of the stairs. Her emerald eyes flashed with determination but also curiosity, glancing between Hunter and me. Her steps faltered, her footing uncertain. She stumbled. In less than a second, I was there, catching her by the waist before she could fall. Careful, little wolf, I teased, my fingers tightening slightly around her, sensing her pulse beneath my palm. Her rebellious spark returned immediately. I wasn't going to fall, she muttered, pushing against my hold half-heartedly. I chuckled, letting her go, but not stepping back. The warmth of her presence lingered. Her expression shifted, and I could see her sharp mind piecing things together. Grace, she said slowly, her tone turning suspicious. Why would the Amber Pack offer to send her away now? I didn't reply immediately, watching the way her thoughts turned behind her focused gaze. Scarlet wasn't just intelligent, she was dangerous when she considered all the angles. They think it'll earn them favor, I answered finally, my voice low. Her brow furrowed, and she looked at me intently. Favor from you or the Shadow Organization? I didn't answer directly, letting her draw her conclusions. She bit her lip, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. They're desperate, she whispered, the words holding a weight of understanding. Her gaze flickered toward Hunter, then back to me. They don't even realize how deep they are into your game, do they? My smile turned cruel. They'll learn soon enough. As her mind raced through the implications, I took her hand, still holding it lightly in mine. Always so worried, I murmured. She gave me a sidelong glance. I'm not worried, she lied. Of course not. Despite her protests, her fingers tightened slightly in mine, as if grounding herself in the steady current flowing between us. This game had only just begun. Chapter 116, Late Night Schemes. I woke up abruptly, my stomach growling. The clock beside me glowed faintly, its hands pointing to a ridiculous hour of the night. I hadn't been hungry before bed. Roman had ensured I ate everything on my plate, sitting right in front of me with that piercing ice blue gaze of his. And yet, here I was. My hand drifted to the coat slung at the edge of the bed. Roman's coat. I hadn't had the heart to leave it hanging in the closet. The subtle scent of his cologne lingered on it, warm and familiar. Without giving it much thought, I threw it over myself. The mansion was eerily quiet as I crept downstairs. The moonlight streaming in through the tall windows gave the hallways a soft silver glow. My bare feet made little sound on the polished wooden floor, though my heart pounded at the thought of running into Roman. He had always been strict, even when we were kids in the Thornpack. Habits, rules, and discipline, those were his essentials. If he found me raiding the kitchen in the middle of the night, I didn't doubt I'd get a lecture about health and consistency. But I reasoned with myself, a little snack wouldn't kill me. As I passed by the study, however, I froze. The faint glow of light from under the door caught my eye. Roman? Awake? I hesitated, my hand brushing over the doorframe lightly before leaning closer. A muffled voice filtered through. Hunter's. Sending Grace here for treatment? They can't be serious. Hunter sounded incredulous. I pressed my back against the corridor wall, suddenly feeling very awake. Roman's POV. Hunter's voice echoed in the quiet study. They'll really send Grace here? They're desperate. It's pathetic. I leaned back in my chair, my fingers steepled together thoughtfully. Not just desperate, I corrected. Reckless. James Amber knows Alexander's humiliations have put the pack in jeopardy. He's scrambling to clean up his son's mess. Hunter's sharp sigh filled the room. And using their Luna's life as leverage? Doesn't that seem excessive? It's their only move left, I said smoothly, the slightest smirk gracing my lips. They think this will appease us. But why would they even consider that you'd want her here? Hunter challenged us, his usual calm demeanor slipping into disbelief. They misunderstood, I replied simply. They think the warning was about Grace, not Alexander. It works to our advantage. Hunter's expression hardened. You want to string them along, then? I nodded, my eyes narrowing. It'll keep Alexander distracted. We control every piece in this game, Hunter. The more desperate they become, the less rational their decisions will be. Let the misery build. Before Hunter could respond, I caught a faint rustle from beyond the study. My eyes darted toward the door. She's awake, I murmured. I nearly jumped when the door opened, Roman's towering figure blocking the light as he stepped into the hallway. His coat, which I was currently wearing, suddenly felt far too warm. Couldn't sleep, little wolf. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, like he already knew why I was skulking around. Hungry, I admitted, clutching the coat tighter around me. Roman's eyes swept over me, lingering on the coat briefly before softening. Hunter appeared behind him, his sharp gaze landing on me. I'll have something prepared, Hunter said casually, heading toward the kitchen. Thanks, I muttered, avoiding Roman's gaze. He leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossing in that authoritative way he always had. You know I don't approve of midnight snacks, he said evenly, his tone bordering on teasing. I tilted my chin defiantly. I missed dinner. His brow raised pointedly. You ate everything. And yet, I countered, gesturing dramatically to my stomach, here I am, starving. His lips twitched, but he didn't reply immediately. Instead, he straightened and nodded toward the kitchen. Fine. Goat, next time, tell me. Yes, Alpha, I replied sarcastically, quickly sidestepping into the kitchen before he could say anything else. The sight of Scarlet in my coat lingered long after she disappeared into the kitchen. Hunter returned quietly after she left, his expression unreadable as always. Are you sure about this? He asked, resuming our conversation as though it hadn't been interrupted. About what? Stringing them along, he clarified. James Amber's desperation benefits us now, but they're cornered, Roman. Cornered wolves are unpredictable. I met his gaze calmly. And that's precisely why we'll let them twist in the wind, Hunter. The more they squirm, the more mistakes they'll make. Mistakes we'll use. Hunter shook his head slightly but didn't argue further. I appreciated his caution. It balanced my own risk-taking nature. The faint sound of laughter pulled my attention back to the kitchen. Scarlet's POV. I returned to the study not long after, balancing a plate of fruit and crackers. Roman was seated again, looking every bit his composed self, despite the glint of amusement in his eyes when he saw me. Late-night feast, he teased. Something like that, I said, deliberately plopping myself onto the arm of his chair. He didn't protest as I nibbled on a piece of fruit, though his gaze remained steady on me. "What are you scheming now?" I asked lightly, watching as his lips twitched slightly, betraying his amusement. "Nothing you can't handle," he answered smoothly. I raised a brow. "And that's supposed to reassure me? Roman, you're practically glowing with mischief. It's unsettling." He chuckled, the sound low and warm. "If you must know, I'm simply ensuring justice. Alexander and his pack have been careless." I popped a cracker into my mouth, humming thoughtfully. "Justice, huh? By dangling Grace's life in front of them?" His smirk widened slightly. "Only poetic." I shook my head but couldn't hide my own grin. There was something undeniably satisfying about watching the amber pack unravel. "You're terrible," I said playfully, though a flicker of worry tickled the back of my mind. His gaze softened and he reached out, lightly brushing a stray piece of hair from my face. "Terrible, but effective. You of all people should understand the need for strategy, Scarlet." I sighed. "Maybe you're right, but it's going to destroy them. Alexander and Grace both, especially her." "She's already destroyed, Scarlet," Roman said quietly, his voice tinged with an uncharacteristic gravity. "The question is whether they'll realize it too late." His words sent a chill through me, but before I could respond, his tone shifted again, lighter, almost teasing. "Tell me about the healing center," he prompted, leaning back slightly. Surprised by the sudden change in topic, I hesitated for a moment before launching into how the business had grown over the years. "It's been incredible," I admitted, my voice softening, "especially with those early contracts from Shadow Industries. They made such a difference." Roman's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Amusement? I wasn't sure. "They apparently only choose the best," I added, feeling a small surge of pride. "So naturally, they chose us." He chuckled softly, his fingers idly running through my hair. "They have good taste," he murmured, the weight of his gaze making my cheeks warm slightly. "Is that a compliment? Or are you just taking credit for my success?" I teased, leaning closer. His smirk was the only answer I received, but it was enough to tell me he knew much more than he ever let on. Chapter 117, Shattered Hopes, James Ambers P. The papers in my hand slammed onto the desk with a force that echoed through the room. My chest rose and fell heavily as I gritted my teeth, trying to contain the fury boiling inside of me. I pushed myself out of the chair and paced the room, running a hand through my hair. Every step I took left dents in the polished wooden floor. I could feel my blood pressure spiking, my wolf mason restless under my skin. "That boy?" I roared, jabbing my finger at the door as if accusing an invisible Alexander. "What is Alexander thinking?" Victoria stood by the window, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her sharp features looked carved from stone, but I knew anger simmered just beneath her measured facade. "What he's always thinking," she spat, her tone icy, about her. My fists curled at her words, nails biting into my palms. I gave him direct orders. Stay away from Grace. Focus on the negotiations. I slammed my fist on the desk, the sound as sharp as my words, and yet he defies us again and again. Victoria turned to face me, her emerald eyes flashing. He's too blinded by his attachment to think clearly, locking everything out but Grace, like a weak pup chasing a scent. I pointed at her, my voice hard. The Shadow organization was clear, complete separation from Grace. This isn't just about some petty emotions, it's about the entire pack's survival. Victoria advanced with a huff, her voice rising. "Do you think I'm unaware of that? I warned him this would happen. Grace has been nothing but a distraction, a poison infecting this pack and your heir's decisions." I growled low in my chest, frustration clawing at me. The tension in the room coiled tighter, suffocating. "Call him," I ordered at last. "Tell him to cut off all contact. This is his final warning, Victoria." She didn't need further instructions, already pulling her phone out and stepping away. Still, I could see her barely holding back her anger. Her frustration mirrored my own. With every passing moment, I could feel the weight pressing harder. We couldn't afford one more mistake, one more reckless disobedience. The air in the corridor felt cold as I stormed out of my father's office, Jason trailing silently behind me. My fury simmered just beneath the surface, each word from my father's lecture echoing in my head. "This is all about control," I snapped, more to myself than to Jason. "They think they can decide everything for me. For Grace, like she's some pawn to sacrifice for their games. Jason said nothing, his quiet gaze reserved as always. That only irritated me more. I did what I thought was right, I growled, my fists clenched at my sides. Grace needs me. She's all I have. Jason finally spoke, his voice calm yet cautious. Alpha, you know what your father said, the Shadow Organization. It's serious. If they've made demands, your father's hands are tied. Tied! I snapped, rounding on him. No, Jason. It's my hands they want tied, not his. My father is hiding behind their influence, waving it like a sword to keep me in line. Jason held his ground, his neutral expression unwavering. And you think disobeying will help Grace? I flinched at his words, my wolf growling internally. The frustration ripped through me, but he had a point. My rash decisions weren't doing Grace any favors. Shaking my head, I sighed heavily. What do they want from her? Why are they so determined to separate us? I don't know, Jason admitted softly, but if you push them, it could cost more than just her. The stakes are higher now. The entire pack depends on these alliances. His eyes locked on mine. This is bigger than Grace. I turned away, staring at the wall as my jaw tightened. I won't abandon her, I said finally, though my voice lacked the conviction I wanted. But I need to understand. Jason's brow furrowed slightly. What are you asking for? Dig deeper, into the Shadow Organization, their motives, everything. My voice dropped to a whisper. I need to know what they're hiding, why they care about Grace. Jason nodded slowly, though I could tell he was reluctant. I'll find out what I can. Before we could continue, my phone buzzed angrily in my pocket. Pulling it out, I groaned at the name glowing on the screen. Mother, I grumbled under my breath, answering reluctantly. Alexander, came Victoria's sharp, clipped tone on the other end. Her frustration radiated through the phone. Yes, Mother, I replied, already bracing myself for the scolding. What do you think you're doing? She snapped immediately, no preamble or pleasantries. Mother, I don't. You know what I mean, she interrupted harshly. I told you once, and I won't say it again, you are putting us all at risk by ignoring the Shadow Organization's orders. I am not ignoring them, I shot back, my voice sharp. I'm doing what I can. You mean defying us? She cut in icily. Because that's what it looks like. Grace is a liability. Her condition, her actions, everything about her has drawn nothing but trouble to this pack. My grip tightened on the phone as her words sank in. Her condition is not her fault, I said through gritted teeth. She's innocent in all this. Innocent, she replied, her voice dripping with disdain. Do you really believe that? After everything she's done in Europe? Do you think her silver poisoning came out of nowhere? That she just stumbled into it? I froze, her accusation punching through my defenses like a blade. My mind raced as doubt I didn't want to acknowledge crept in. Grace didn't, I started, but the words faltered. No, Alexander, Victoria said coldly. She brought this on herself, and now she's dragging you and the entire pack down with her. She's still my mate, I whispered, but it sounded like a last grasp at straws. And being your mate doesn't excuse her actions, Victoria retorted sharply. The Shadow Organization made it clear. They don't want her near you. Not until we finalize negotiations. Do I make myself clear? The words finalize negotiations stung, their weight heavy on my chest. Yes, Mother, I murmured reluctantly. You'll keep your distance, she said firmly, and this conversation is over. The call ended abruptly, leaving me in the cold silence of the corridor. Jason's gaze flicked toward me, but I ignored it, my mind spiraling. The small healing den room had become suffocating. Every time I looked at the pale walls, I felt trapped, like the silver poisoning in my veins had reached out and chained me here. But today was different. Alexander had called earlier with news that changed everything. Tomorrow, I was finally leaving this place. The seaside mansion would be my new sanctuary, a place away from whispers, pitying gazes, and judgmental healers. I turned the silver bracelet on my wrist, a gift Alexander had given me when our bond first formed. It reminded me of his promises, a future together, safe and happy. Holding my phone tightly, I waited for his call. When it buzzed, I answered instantly, my voice almost breathless with excitement. Alexander, I said eagerly, unable to suppress the joy in my tone. You're calling again? Did you confirm the move for tomorrow? There was hesitation on the other end of the line. My excitement dimmed slightly. What's wrong? I asked, my heart skipping. He sighed heavily before speaking. Grace, there's something I need to tell you. I held my breath, anxiety clawing up my throat. What is it? The mansion, he started. It's not available. I blinked, the words tumbling in slow motion. Not available? I repeated faintly, clutching the phone tighter. There's a problem, he admitted. His words stumbled as if he wanted to get it out quickly, like ripping off a bandage. The owner refused to sell. I sat up straight, the room beginning to spin. What do you mean, refused? I tried, Grace, he said, voice thick with strain, but it wasn't possible. My breathing quickened, the edges of my vision blurring. You promised, I nearly shouted, my voice trembling. You said it was ready, Alexander. You promised! I thought I could secure it, he said, his words weaker now. You lied! I choked out, tears spilling as my chest felt like it was caving in. Grace, listen. No, I screamed, my voice loud enough to echo in the small room. You don't have any plan at all, do you? Where am I supposed to go now? He hesitated, and his next words felt like ice pressing against my skin. The winter pack, he said softly. They can... No, I'm not going back there. The words came out broken, a mix of sobs and screams. But he didn't argue this time. Instead, the call ended abruptly, leaving me alone with my despair. The door creaked open and my mother entered, her face pale with concern. Grace, what's wrong? What happened? My sobs intensified, my voice shaky as I pointed at my phone. He lied, Mom, I gasped. The mansion. He wasn't going to save me. He never even had it. Her eyes hardened, and her lips tightened into a thin line. As she pulled me into a hug, her expression betrayed her own growing fury. We both felt it. Everything was falling apart. Chapter 118, Morning Encounters. The sunlight poured gently into the room, kissing my skin with warmth as I stretched lazily. For the first time in days, I woke up feeling fully rested. No strange visions, no overwhelming stress, just peace. I glanced at my phone to check the time and saw Claire's name flash on the screen. Her timing was both impeccable and uncanny as always. Claire, good morning, I answered cheerily, rubbing the remnants of sleep from my eyes. Scarlett, she greeted in her usual brisk tone. I need you to delay your visit to the healing center today. Margaret, the elder, asked for you to stop by her sanatorium. Margaret? I asked, sitting up straighter with a frown. I'd only met the ancient wolf doctor twice before, enough to recognize her as a brilliant yet eccentric figure. Her herbal fields provided some of the rarest ingredients to my center, but we hadn't interacted often beyond business transactions. Yes, Margaret herself, Claire confirmed. She insists she needs to speak with you directly. It sounded urgent. Her efficient tone left little room for questioning, and a part of me trusted her instinct completely. Sighing, I got up from the bed. All right, let Margaret know I'm on my way. I didn't have much time to dwell on her unexpected request, as shortly after, Roman casually strolled into the room, dressed immaculately as usual. His ice-blue eyes softened when they landed on me, though the playful smirk that tugged at his lips sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. "And where are we off to this morning?" he asked, leaning against the door with his ever-commanding presence. "Margaret's sanatorium," I mumbled as I adjusted my scarf, determined not to meet his accusatory stare. She requested me specifically. Roman raised a brow, clearly filing the information away. Without skipping a beat, he motioned toward the doorway. "Then let's not keep her waiting. The SUV is ready downstairs." I rolled my eyes but couldn't stop myself from smiling faintly. Roman's overprotectiveness often walked the fine line between endearing and exasperating. In the warmth of the black SUV, I found myself lost in thought, trying to piece together why someone like Margaret would request me so insistently. Roman, sitting beside me, observed me with a sharp glint in his eye. The faint smirk returned to his lips, as if he had just thought of something amusing. "You look unusually puzzled, little wolf," he said, breaking the silence. I sighed, knowing he wouldn't leave me alone until he pried out the source of my thoughts. "I just don't understand why Margaret would—" "Oh, come now," Roman interrupted, that playful tone cutting through my words. "Don't tell me you didn't consider the possibility that she might want to introduce you to her beloved grandson." I narrowed my eyes at him, the irritation bubbling to the surface. First of all, if she has a grandson, I doubt she would pull me into her matchmaking whims. Second, I hesitated, noticing his smirk deepened. Second, he prompted, leaning ever so slightly closer. Second, I already know you'd chase off any potential match, Margaret suggested, with nothing more than your usual icy glare, I retorted, crossing my arms as a smirk formed on my lips now. Roman let out a low chuckle, but the sound was laced with something deeper, a possessiveness that set my wolf Cora on edge. You think I'd stop at just a glare? He mused, lightly running his fingers along his jaw. His voice carried that dangerous edge of confidence, a reminder of just how far he would go to stake his claim. There wasn't much I could say to that, so I simply shook my head and looked out the window, though I could feel his gaze lingering on me. The sanatorium came into view, a sprawling structure with gentle hills and greenery surrounding it. Its charm stemmed from its simplicity, a testament to the elders' dedication to natural healing methods. As the SUV pulled up, Roman addressed Hunter. Accompany her inside. Ensure everything is in order. Hunter nodded without hesitation, sliding out of the front seat before opening my door. Roman remained seated, his piercing gaze fixated on me as I prepared to exit. Just as I reached for the door handle, his hand shot out and gently gripped my wrist, pulling me back toward him. The sudden movement left me breathless as I found myself face to face with him in the narrow confines of the car. My heart raced, his proximity setting every nerve in me alight. Roman's intent gaze dropped slightly, and for a fleeting moment I hoped, he was about to kiss me again. Instead, he reached toward my chest, brushing lightly against me. I froze, the blood rushing to my cheeks as my mind raced. Roman, I began, but his voice cut me off, calm yet firm. Stay still, he instructed. His fingers adjusted my coat, pulling it snug over my shoulders before his hands moved to his own scarf. With deliberate care, he wrapped it around my neck deftly, the warmth immediately enveloping me. Better, he said, his tone dropping as his eyes flickered to the fading bite marks on my skin. Can't have anyone seeing these. I gaped at him, completely torn between annoyance and embarrassment. Noticing my expression, Roman tilted his head slightly, a slow smirk spreading across his face. What? He teased. Did you think I was planning to be intimate with you again? The heat in my cheeks intensified, and before I could stammer out some form of protest, Roman's soft laughter filled the air. Frustrated and flustered, I bolted from the car, the scarf still wrapped tightly around me. His amused chuckle followed me all the way to Hunter's side, earning a questioning glance from the beta. I didn't bother to explain, opting instead to march ahead toward Margaret's awaiting appointment. The air around the healing den's entrance was heavy with tension. I could barely contain my anger, fists clenched tightly at my sides as I glared at the enforcers standing like immovable statues near Grace's treatment room. Their stubbornness tested every ounce of my patience, but I wouldn't let them win. You can't keep her locked up here, I hissed, my voice low but furious. This is unacceptable. Grace needs... You've been informed of the Alpha King's orders, one guard interrupted sternly. There will be no movement of Luna Grace without explicit approval. Beside me, Grace hid behind her shawl, her frail figure trembling as her fear and anger warred within her. She reached for my arm, but I shook her off, unwilling to relent. This is nothing but cruelty, I snapped. Movement from the corner of my eye drew my attention, and my breath caught for a fraction of a second before sheer fury filled my chest. Scarlet. The sight of her strolling toward the sanatorium froze me in place. For a brief moment, the daughter I had long betrayed looked untouchable, surrounded by two wolves heavily intimidating in presence. Abandoning Grace's argument, I marched straight toward Scarlet, leaving Grace staring after me in disbelief. Stop where you are, I called, anger lacing every word. Scarlet paused, her emerald eyes narrowing as she faced me without fear. Her posture screamed defiance, and I hated it. Sarah, she greeted me with icy indifference, her tone brushing past me like I was nothing more than a stranger. You owe me an explanation, I began, pointing an accusing finger toward her. This severance you so publicly pushed. Her expression remained cold, and when she spoke, her words cut through me like a blade. Severing was necessary, she said curtly, to stop the Winter Pack from ever thinking they could exploit me again. My mouth fell open at her audacity, the sting of her accusation draining me of every counter-argument I had prepared. You would say something like that, I spat, trying to gather the shreds of my shattered pride. After everything Don't, she interrupted, her voice sharp and commanding. Don't stand there and pretend you cared when you've spent years proving otherwise. Each word was another in my foundation, but I couldn't stop myself. What happened to you, Scarlet? I whispered, more to myself than to her. She tilted her chin proudly, her gaze piercing through me with the weight of my failure as a mother. Nothing happened to me, she replied quietly. I simply woke up. Chapter 119, Bitter Confrontations. Sarah's glare burned into me, her eyes a mix of rage and desperation. The air thickened with tension, almost suffocating in its weight. Why do you keep showing up like ghosts that refuse to be exorcised? I snapped, my voice clipped and cutting. I told you on the phone already. I severed all ties. I'm done. What part of that do you not understand? Sarah's composure faltered, her lips pressed together, trembling slightly, before she barked back. You cut off your relationship with your own family? You think that's something admirable? Family? I hissed, folding my arms and taking one deliberate step closer. Let's not rewrite history, Sarah. The only time I felt like family was when I was far away from all of you and building my own life. Her face turned as red as her pack crest. For a moment, I think she might actually slap me. How dare you? She began, voice shaking with disbelief. Scarlet! Grace's voice cut through, soft but urgent, interrupting her Luna mother. She stood a few paces away, clutching her shawl tightly around her frail, pale frame. Her trembling fingers reminded me of a wilting leaf. What did you do? Grace's voice wavered as her pale blue eyes locked onto mine. What did you say to the Amber Pack? Why are there so many guards outside my healing room? I blinked, genuinely shocked by the sheer ego it took for her to assume I'd waste a second of my time on her. I crossed my arms and tilted my head slightly, an amused smirk creeping onto my lips. Do you seriously think I care enough about you to scheme something like that? I drawled. Hunter, standing nearby, let out a short laugh under his breath. Grace stiffened, the slight tremor of her body becoming more pronounced. Then who? Who else could make this happen? I rolled my eyes dramatically, shaking my head. Maybe Alexander's parents? I know their grasp on the concept of loyalty is about as tight as a sieve. Funny how that didn't come to mind first, isn't it? Grace paled even further, if that was even possible at this point, and stumbled back a step, her weak resolve visibly cracking. Sarah's anger reached a boiling point. She rounded on me, her finger nearly hitting my chest as she screamed, Do you think this is funny? Do you find pleasure in tormenting her? The hypocrisy hit me like a slap. I laughed, short, sharp, and so cold it even startled Sarah. Torment her? You honestly think I care about her enough to waste my time? Sarah's already trembling lips quivered even harder as she shot accusations. You're bitter. You still love Alexander, don't you? That's why you're doing this. You can't stand Grace being his mate. A low snicker slipped out, and I wasn't even sure if it was me or Hunter this time. Good one, Hunter muttered with amusement, though he made no effort to hide his smirk. The idea was as absurd as it was entertaining. I leaned closer, my voice dropping to a mockingly soft whisper. Listen carefully, Sarah. I wouldn't touch Alexander if he were the last male wolf left on the planet. Keep dreaming. Grace suddenly stepped forward, desperation flickering in her eyes. She grabbed my sleeve with shaking hands, her touch feather-light, as though she knew even the tiniest connection might push me away. Scarlet, please, she murmured, her voice practically dripping with practiced vulnerability. Her big, watery eyes stared up at me, those same manipulative tricks I'd seen her use on Alexander over and over again. I only ever wanted peace between us. I never wanted to come between you and Alexander, even if it looks that way. Put yourself in my position. I'm dying. Her voice cracked dramatically, her fingers tightening ever so slightly. You've seen the silver. It's consuming me. I know I'm not worth much in your eyes, but... I didn't bother to hear the rest of her pity speech. My wolf, Cora, growled impatiently under my skin as I yanked my sleeve free. My strength, enhanced by the fury bubbling beneath my surface, sent Grace stumbling to the ground. She hit the floor hard, her body spasming slightly as new streaks of silver coursed visibly through her veins. Her gasp of pain was sharp and deliberate, like someone rehearsing the perfect note to draw sympathy. Grace! Sarah's shriek pierced the air as she rushed to her beloved fake daughter. She dropped down, her hands desperately examining Grace's face as though touching her might fix everything. Grace, true to her performer's streak, moaned weakly, clutching at her chest and barely lifting a quivering hand to her mother. It's my fault," she whispered theatrically, her voice as thin and delicate as frost on a window pane. "I shouldn't. I rolled my eyes so hard it almost hurt. "Oh, stop it," I snapped, cutting off whatever Shakespearean monologue she planned to rehearse next. "You're not fooling anyone, least of all me." Sarah turned her icy gaze to me, her eyes blazing. "You've gone too far. Get out of here. Leave Northern Territory. Grace doesn't need your hostility poisoning her further." I narrowed my eyes, taking a single step forward as I challenged her with nothing more than my presence. "No," I said simply, the word echoing like steel against stone. "You," Sarah began, barely holding back her howl of fury. I could barely breathe through my rage. My blood boiled, my heart thundering in my chest, as Scarlett stood there, defiant and untouchable. "Daniel," I snapped into the phone, my voice seething with barely restrained fury. At the other end, my son, my only son, sounded weary as always. "Mother, it's late. What's this about?" "It's Scarlett," I all but screamed. "She's here, and she's ruining everything. Do something before she causes more harm." There was a pause, and Daniel's tone grew sharper. "She's already severed her ties to us. What do you want me to do?" "Remove her," I demanded firmly. "Get her out of Northern Territory. She's provoking Grace's silver poisoning. Her very presence is making things worse." I could hear him exhale deeply, his weariness palpable through the line. "And you know this how? Do you think I'm stupid?" I retorted, barely able to keep my composure. "I don't care how. You're the heir. Use your power. Don't make me regret raising you." After a long silence, Daniel muttered reluctantly, "I'll see what I can do." Barely had the call ended before I turned toward Scarlett with triumphant fury blazing in my gaze. "You've pushed too far," I warned her coldly, "and you'll see the consequences sooner than you think." Scarlett wasn't fazed in the slightest. Her emerald eyes gleamed with mock amusement as her lips curled into a taunting smirk. "Consequences?" she repeated, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "From this oh-so-powerful winter pack of yours? Seems to me if you were capable, you wouldn't waste time warning me." Before I could respond, Scarlett turned to that beta of hers, Hunter, and commanded with a sharp edge, "Hunter, update me on the investigation into Grace's connection to Thomas Ward." The name hit Grace like a whip. Her body flinched involuntarily, almost imperceptibly, but enough to show she was hiding something. "Thomas?" I repeated, frowning as I glanced between her and Scarlett. Scarlett looked amused, almost pleased by my confusion. "Oh, don't look at me. Maybe you should ask Grace." When I turned to Grace for answers, I could feel it, the sudden, unmistakable panic emanating from her trembling figure. Her face had drained of all its remaining color, her lips quivering as though she were fighting to keep herself from spilling secrets better left buried. Chapter 120, Dangerous Revelations, Third Person's POV. Scarlett's emerald eyes gleamed with cold calculation as she lingered near Grace and Sarah, her presence unnerving them both. Sarah's fury was palpable, her protective instincts for her adopted daughter turning into desperation. Grace, meanwhile, trembled beneath Scarlett's penetrating gaze. Her pallid face betrayed both fear and guilt, a toxic mix that clung to the air around her. Scarlett took a deliberate step forward, folding her arms as her tone turned deceptively sweet. "By the way, Sarah, there's something quite peculiar I've been wondering about," she began nonchalantly, leaning her weight slightly onto one hip. Sarah immediately stiffened, her gaze narrowing. "What now, Scarlett? Haven't you said enough?" She spat, clutching Grace's trembling frame closer against her side, as though shielding her from Scarlett's words. Scarlett gave a short, mirthless laugh. "Oh, I doubt I'll ever say as much as I'd like to," she replied dryly. She then turned her focus completely to Sarah, ignoring Grace's feigned sickly demeanor. "I'm curious about that rather large sum of money Grace transferred recently. You must know about it, right?" The mention of money made Sarah blink in confusion, her posture faltering as irritation gave way to uncertainty. "Money? What money?" "Oh, you don't know?" Scarlett raised an eyebrow mockingly, her voice soaked in faux innocence. "I assume it was for some sort of very, very urgent expense. Perhaps for her so-called European treatment? Grace's body jerked slightly at the accusation, her fragile frame nearly collapsing further into Sarah's grasp. It was for that, she stammered, her voice weak and shaky. I needed specialists, the best ones for my condition. Scarlett smirked, the corner of her lips curling into a victorious shape. The deliberate unease Grace tried to mask only added to her certainty. Really? For treatment? Scarlett's tone was laced with mocking disbelief. She tilted her head slowly, studying Grace's trembling hands. That's strange. You see, the name associated with the matches someone. Not a healer, but a rogue wolf. Grace froze entirely. Scarlett leaned forward slightly, lowering her tone enough to be dripping with venom. Recognize the name Thomas Ward? The air around them seemed to shatter, the weight of those words landing like a thunderclap. Grace's panic was immediate. Her breathing hitched audibly, distress visibly creeping over her features as her pale blue eyes darted wildly between Scarlett and Sarah. I don't. You're lying. Grace tried to spit back in denial, but her voice broke halfway through the words. Her shaking hands hovered over her chest like she could physically keep her crumbling composure intact. Sarah turned sharply toward Grace, her protective demeanor slowly morphing into something closer to confusion, then suspicion. Grace, what is she talking about? Who is Thomas Ward? Scarlett's expression remained calm, as though she were watching from a throne. Hunter, standing silently near her, finally spoke up, his gravelly voice cutting through the tension. The rogue in question, Hunter stated bluntly, was recently discovered to be involved in a coordinated attack years ago. Multiple werewolves severely wounded. One was left nearly dead. Scarlett's jaw tightened slightly at this, though she kept her calm demeanor intact. Oh, yes. A few details about those attacks stood out to me. Her voice lowered, her words sharp as daggers. Specifically, hired rogue wolves targeting Thornpack and Winterpack members. Imagine that. Hunter's words seemed to squeeze Grace's last fragments of composure from her frail body. She shook her head vehemently, her lips trembling as fresh silver-marked blotches crept up her neck. No, it's not what you think, Grace wailed suddenly, collapsing even further against Sarah. Her gasp sounded strained now, as if Scarlett's knowledge was suffocating her further with every word. Sarah looked horrified, her hands frantically touching Grace's face and neck in an effort to soothe what appeared to be worsening effects of her silver poisoning. Grace, Sarah cried out helplessly. What is she saying? Did you know this? This Thomas Ward? What have you done? No, I didn't. Grace keened through her sobs, clutching onto Sarah for dear life. It's not. Scarlett stared down at the cracked and crumbling facade Grace now displayed, her emerald eyes cold and pitiless. Turning on her heel, she gestured to Hunter with a simple nod before they walked away together. Behind her, Grace dissolved further into hysterics, collapsing entirely into Sarah's frantic arms. Sarah's panicked cries for healers echoed down the long corridor as Scarlett's confident steps faded into the distance. Grace's weight grew heavier in my arms, her frail form trembling violently as muffled cries spilled from her lips. My heart raced with a mix of panic and disbelief as I shouted for anyone to bring help. Grace, please, hold on, I begged her, gripping her close despite my own shaking hands. But her silver poisoning had surged uncontrollably, the streaks of venom threading through her veins like a curse manifesting itself further before my eyes. My mind raced as Scarlett's words burned themselves into my thoughts. Thomas Ward, a rogue wolf, blackmail. What in the moon goddess's name had Grace done? I'm sorry, Grace whimpered faintly, her voice barely a whisper as I tried to support her limp figure upright. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean. What didn't you mean, Grace? I demanded, my voice strained and my eyes desperate. Tears blurred my vision. Talk to me! Explain it! But her only answer was soft, incoherent murmurs as more silver bloomed at her throat. Glaring around the empty hallway, I searched for solutions, for allies. Seeing no immediate options, I whipped my phone out, my fingers trembling too much to grip it properly. I dialed Alexander without a second thought, the connection buzzing faintly before falling flat as no answer came. I tried again and again. He didn't pick up once. Before my panic could reach its peak, another line of thought pierced my mind. Victoria. She had been standing firmly against Grace from the start. Perhaps she knew something of this. Perhaps she would help now. The phone barely rang once before her voice came cold and cutting through the speaker. "Sarah," Victoria greeted me, though her tone lacked any warmth. "I've been expecting your calls." "Victoria," I bit out, unable to keep the hysteria from my voice. "Tell Alexander to come immediately. I need him here." Grace's condition. "Save it," Victoria snapped, cutting through me like a blade. "You've spent years involving my son in Grace's endless melodrama. This is where it stops. Do you understand me?" "What are you?" I stumbled over my words, confused by her venomous tone. "What are you saying? This is your Luna, your son's mate." "Mate or not, Grace is a problem," Victoria stated coldly. There was no faltering in her sharp voice as her words struck deeper with every syllable. "She isn't innocent, not now, and certainly not before. And her condition." "Her condition?" I repeated, my chest tightening as unease swirled within me. "Ask her yourself, Sarah," Victoria spat, "about the rogue attack near Thornpack territory, the one Scarlet nearly died in. Ask her why we sent her to Europe in the first place, and who exactly she worked with while she was there." The line between us felt like it vibrated with the weight of those revelations. "You're lying," I whispered faintly, though my voice carried no conviction. "Oh, how I wish I were," Victoria replied sharply. "But I have plenty of evidence to match that name Scarlet so kindly dropped earlier. Thomas Ward. She's my daughter," I tried to plead, though my voice betrayed my unraveling mind. "And Scarlet's not," Victoria cut back heatedly. "How much longer are you willing to destroy your bloodline for Grace's lies?